really MOI of understanding on how we can really open up the strait. That's the real question here. But the more important angle here is the fact that unlike what Washington has noted that there's already been regime change in Tehran, we have not seen behavior change from the Islamic Republic leaders currently, the ones that are leading the negotiations. Of course, they've been shielded from potential Israeli assassinations. That said, that is not a guarantee forever. If they fail to really reach an agreement, I can imagine the president not only moving forward with his threats against critical Iranian infrastructure, but also further leadership decapitation and genuinely disrupt the command structure of the regime.
Jonathan, I would be remiss if I did not showcase this social media post that the president posted over the weekend. I do want to say it's a bit colorful, big graphic, and some posts here. He posted this via Truth Social. Tuesday will be Power Plant Day and Bridge Day all wrapped up in one in Iran. There will be nothing like it. Open the expletive strait. And he just continues on to say, or you'll be living in, and I'm assuming that our viewers can guess what he's saying here. So he is increasingly putting this pressure on Iran. I have to know, how is the Iranian regime responding when they see the president take to social media to issue these sort of demands, and within this context?
The Islamic Republic leaders know after a few rounds of negotiations and threats consecutively coming one after another that any threat posed by this administration is legitimate. Trump has followed suit with every threat he's made, whether it was prior to the 12-day war or with the recent ongoing campaign. So that's very key in the minds of Iranian policymakers, knowing that when he threatens, he's going to follow through. That said, the messaging itself could actually facilitate and pave the way for Tehran to, one way or another, try to create a rally around the flag effect. Once you actually threaten Iranian infrastructure and go after assets that are also beneficial to average Iranians, there is a risk there that you might be alienating them. That said, these are people that have been living under the Islamic Republic, the mismanagement by the regime that has been, of course, systemic, both on the infrastructure side, economic side, political, on whatever angle you look at. So to the average Iranian, the regime has not been competent enough to deliver on anything. So maybe to their minds, any attacks on critical infrastructure would just be a continuation of living under the Islamic Republic. But that said, bridges and power plants, those are critical things. Ultimately, Iranians have been living under very harsh conditions, and worsening that could escalate the situation internally. So it's a double-edged sword when you threaten those kinds of assets inside Iran. That said, if the idea is to somehow create some sort of an anti-regime movement again and reignite that momentum, the best way to go about it is to ensure that you really play into the grievances of Iranians, you play into the challenges that they have versus the regime. But I would end it with this, talking to folks on the ground and being Iranian myself, the understanding there is a lot of these key infrastructure can be rebuilt. We can rebuild roads and bridges and power plants, but what we cannot do is to revive the tens of thousands of young, innocent, unarmed protesters that were massacred on the street. So time is of essence. So long as this campaign continues to be about liberating Iranian people, or at least paving the way for them to define their own destiny, I think the average Iranian will be on board. But that said, messaging is important. PR really matters during wartime.
And we're going to get to just the...
Hello, my name is DrPaulCottrell, and we are live streaming on YouTube, Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. Hopefully there's not a delay. It seems like there might be a slight delay that I may need to fix. But thank you for joining. We're going to be continuing listening in on the Live Now broadcast here.
Iranian civilians and also protesters a little later on in the segment. First, though, staying with the Strait of Hormuz for this next question. This is a social media post courtesy of Fox News correspondent Matt Finn. He says this: the UAE insists even if there is a ceasefire, Iran cannot remain in control of the Strait of Hormuz and call the strait everyone's problem. The issue, Hormuz, has to be a part and parcel of the settlement of any conflict with clear agreement on that. Jonathan, is there any kind of scenario in which Iran would cede control of the strait? And what are possibly some of the internal conversations within the Iranian regime when they see global leaders talking about the future of the strait and that Iran may not have full control of it?
So when we talk about global,
Look, what's going on over there? I'm doing the work. I'm doing everything. You're way too scatterbrained. You are using.
so when we talk about global leaders, let's say pushing back against the Islamic Republic, so far we haven't seen really much or anything from Europe. France actually caved and did not vote for that UN resolution against the Islamic Republic, which is why their ships can now operate in the Strait of Hormuz. The United Arab Emirates has been the only one that's taken even remotely an assertive stance against the regime. I do think Washington is going to take that into account. So far, Persian Gulf states, Europe, of course, China and Russia, nothing really meaningful coming from them for them to really condemn the Islamic Republic, which is quite concerning. And of course, gives the regime an incentive to continue with its, of course, destructive behavior and regionalizing the war. So those are the main issues. But you mentioned something very significant, which is how has the regime responded, or what is Tehran's decision making or policy thoughts as to what leverage they had, what can they concede. And the mindset was, and I saw this over the weekend, there was an interview with a regime official. And he deliberately noted that should we give up the access to the Strait of Hormuz, we will turn into Gaza. So the Iranian mindset right now is, should they compromise in any way, that's going to be the total end of the regime or the Islamic Republic as we know. That's their mindset. So going back to the question on negotiations, probably what they're thinking is that they want some long-term meaningful guarantees that should they open the strait, there's going to be no more attacks against Iranian leaders and so on and so forth. Now, would Washington ever provide something like that during times of crisis, given that very much Jerusalem and Washington are aligned on somehow paving the way for the prospects of regime change? Looks very unlikely, but again, just tells you about how far apart the different two sides are during an ongoing conflict.
Jonathan, we have another major development from early this morning. Taking a look at a social media post from the Israel Defense Forces, eliminated, and they're talking about the fact that the head of the intelligence for the Iranian Revolutionary Guard was killed. What is the most significant impact from this latest killing of this major general?
The main impact is internal. Looking at Israeli assassination waves throughout the past 5 weeks, there's been two parallel pillars, but one has been stronger than the other. Of course, one focus has been taking out the command structure, missile, command people, figures that are either tasked with developing grand strategy of regime defiance or somehow coordinating the different armed forces factions. Now, parallel to that, which has been more significant, is the internal security structure. So individuals that are involved in repressing protesters, killing unarmed Iranians, or somehow terrorizing the masses of the population to deter them from taking to the street. And that's what this individual is. So being of course, the intel command of the RGC, is one of his main responsibilities is actually surveilling dissidents inside and working behind the scenes to ensure that the average Iranian has no hope and is afraid of taking to the street. That's their primary job. And of course, the RGC being a brutal instrument of torturing the Iranians and dissidents, this is a devastating blow. But the grand strategic agenda by Israel here is to, at least from what it seems, is to eliminate the top leadership, so the commanders of key forces, and then to go after mid-level commanders, brigade leaders, things of that nature, and inform them that time is not on their side. Should they not somehow work with Israel or with Iranian dissidents, they'll also be eliminated. So that's the strategy there. We have to keep in mind there's hundreds of thousands of Iranian armed personnel left. So it's not realistic to expect all of them to be killed during this war. I think the idea is to either have them defect through PSYOPs or arm the Iranian populace so they can define their own destiny and actually counter whatever is repressing them the most, which is this armed body of the RGC and military.
We're taking a live look over in Tel Aviv, Israel. Again, Israel is the one that is claiming responsibility for that latest killing. And there's a couple of more social media posts that I want to get your reaction from, Jonathan. And these next couple of posts have to do with Kurdish forces. It's something that we talked about when this war first broke out several weeks ago. Fox News correspondent Trey Yates says this, and he posted this over the weekend. The United States sent guns to the Iranian protesters through the Kurds. President Trump told Fox News, quote, "We sent guns to the protesters, a lot of them, and I think the Kurds took the guns." Now, some Kurdish factions also responded, and Trey has another social media post. He says this, they responding to the remarks from President Trump, quote, "We did not receive any weapons during the time of demonstrations in Iran." Fox also reached out to additional Kurdish parties for comment. We're waiting to hear on that. So the question with this, what kind of moves are we seeing from Kurdish forces, Jonathan, and what do we know about potential communication between the Kurds and the U.S.?
There are so many moving parts with the Kurdish developments that it's really hard to narrow down. But the overall image here was that the United States and Israel were somehow entertaining, deploying, or at least assisting Iranian and Iraqi Kurdish faction. But what ended up happening, at least looking at online reporting, indicates that the Kurds did not receive enough reassurances that should they launch a ground operation against the Islamic Republic, they will receive sufficient air support or just military backing as a whole. Because they saw what happened in Syria, they were afraid that if they were to attack the regime and not be fully backed, the regime stays in power, and that is horrible news for them. So that's one guarantee they did not get. On the other hand, the situation would be really volatile. Looking at the Middle East, the idea of arming insurgent groups and separatist groups and sometimes terror groups against one another has not worked out long term. The idea is that you should work with a country's national identities to get systemic change, as opposed to trying to appeal to some sort of sectarian or ethnocentric grievances, in this case being the Kurds. Further indication as to why it would not be the best idea to somehow arm separatist groups. So again, that's all the moving parts with the Kurdish problem. But that said, these groups have been instrumental. They've smuggled in Starlink devices. It's not really surprising that they're elements, because ultimately some of them are criminal networks that are working in the shadows. Once you do that, there's no checks or balances on any operations that are being carried out. So it's not surprising that they're keeping some. I think the real question on everyone's mind is, did they keep all the weapons? Did they supply some? And the key term here is urban areas, center of Iran. So of course, you have separatist movements and you have tribes and you have different armed factions by Iran's borders, but those are not where the major cities are. Major cities, urban centers are in the center of the country, and that's going to be instrumental if we're going to have systemic change. I'm thinking at least 10 cities over 1 million people inside Iran, and those are going to be crucial if they're armed during times of unrest. Not surprising the Kurds denied it, of course, publicly. They're not going to ever admit that they've received any forces. And the last thing I'll say is, the Kurdish factions that did respond, they specifically said they did not get weapons during the protest wave. It might mean that they actually got some sort of equipment after the protest wave ended. But ultimately, everyone's watching for a call to protest and a major uprising inside the country. And the only thing that could actually change the calculus is if there are armed resistant groups or units across the country. So far, we haven't seen that, but it's not surprising. So it's going to be defections paired with arming dissidents against the Islamic Republic.
All right.
So you just mentioned there that some people...
Again, thank you for joining. We are live streaming on YouTube and Rumble. On my end, there's a little bit of delay, but on your end, everything seems to be working just fine. I greatly appreciate it if you share the links. Ask your social media to follow me, and that way it'll help to grow the channel. But thank you very much. I greatly appreciate for the ones that are watching. We are simulcasting on X Spaces. If you want to call into the show, you can by just asking for the mic. You just go to my X channel and look at the X Spaces that's live streaming right now. I also have many products on my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. You can also watch the live streams on my website. You can watch both versions, the large screen and the telemetry. We're going to go over the market today. A lot is happening in the oil market for obvious reasons, and we're going to figure out what the game plan is and how to trade it. But please help support the work that I do by donating. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or buy me a coffee on my website and get the great products that I offer. One great product is a very strong antioxidant. This antioxidant is 1,000 times stronger than vitamin C. This you can get in avocado oil, MCT coconut oil, or extra virgin olive oil. This is a very strong antioxidant. You take a teaspoon a day every day, and this will help with bringing down stress in the cell, improve your mitochondria. You'll have more energy. You'll have more ATP. By soaking up free radicals at the vascular level, you're going to be able to reduce plaque formation. By soaking up free radicals at the neuron level, you're improving the health of your neuron. You're improving the positive neuroplasticity. You're going to be able to think more faster. You're going to be able to have better memory. This will also help to boost up your immune system and your endocrine system by bringing down inflammation, by bringing down stress, and by soaking up free radicals. This will also help with improving your basal layer for your skin. You stack this with resveratrol. It's a great stack to actually improve your skin health. So you get lots of benefits by taking the C60. You can get it in a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, or an 8 ounce configuration. Take a teaspoon a day every day. I've been doing this protocol since 2016. So 10 years, every day, teaspoon a day. It's a very potent antioxidant. It's really important as part of the protocol to slow down the aging process. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the C60. All right, let's go to Al Jazeera. We have about another 5 minutes before the market opens.
Petrochemical exports will be impacted, that this will be a devastating economic blow to Iran and the government, and that advances Israel's proclaimed goal of attempting to collapse the regime. It also sounds almost moderate when you compare it with some of what is being said by Likud strategists from Netanyahu's own party, that Iran needs to be hit like Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That is the only way to victory, they argue.
Nora and Romana, thank you. Iran says it's carried out strikes in Israel, including strategic centers in Haifa and chemical companies in Beersheba. Israeli media is reporting that at least 4 people have been killed in Haifa. At least 4 others have been wounded. And several areas have been hit with intercepted debris filed from projectiles, including parts of Tel Aviv and the city of Bnei Brak. In central Israel. The Israeli army says the missiles were cluster ammunition that scattered across 27 locations. Let's go back to Nora to talk about this. So Nora, look, I mean, we've got Israeli population centers that have been hit, refineries, ports, sensitive infrastructure, the airports faced a disruption, a potential closure. This is anything but normal. Israel has been very careful about how it controls the narrative when it comes to the damage. Is it possible to give an assessment of how widespread it has been?
Well, the assessment can only rely on what information is released, but let me tell you this. There are 26,000 petitions for compensation filed by Israelis so far. Now, these are petitions for significant damage. The petitions and damage that is deemed to be of smaller, less pricey bills, if you will, they have another streamlined process that doesn't even get counted with those 26,000. We see the impact where the Israeli military censor does not black out the information. Iran is using a variety of weapons, the weapons that split into various missiles, the missiles that also have bomblets, which could be described as cluster munition, and those ballistic missiles like the ones we saw in Haifa yesterday that can evade interception and does hit the target. And sometimes we get delayed a clarity on the targets. Like at one point, 2 days ago in Tahtigba, we saw a lot of damage reported. That was cleared, but it took almost 24 hours to clarify that the building that was struck in Tahtigba was actually a factory for drones, a military target that is. So at this point, we have fresh reports of damage in Lod, in Rishon LeZion. That's near Tel Aviv. That's in the area that is most populated in Israel, where there are a lot of army bases, a lot of factories, where Ben Gurion Airport is as well. We don't know what was damaged per se, but we do know that a lot of damage has been done. And in any case, all Israelis who hear the sirens are within range, have to head to the shelter, no matter what the estimate is, no matter how many missiles are being fired.
Okay, we're gonna go to Fox News talking about Pakistan exchanges framework to end war in Iran. Right now, the oil futures are at 112. Natural gas futures are at 2.856. Market's gonna open up in about a minute or so. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Boomer Boost. Boomer Boost has 68 nutrients. These nutrients will help to improve your immune system, help to improve your endocrine system, your brain function, your musculature, your metabolism will increase. You'll have a steady burn of energy. You'll be producing more ATP. You'll help with your cardiovascular health and slow down the aging process. This is a very powerful supplement that you should be taking every day. It's a month supply. You mix it with soft foods, filtered water, a smoothie, or even with just milk or filtered water, but take it every day. This is very powerful, and you can stack it with the C60, you get the max benefit. And again, this is targeting multiple systems, and that's the whole point of my protocol. You're targeting multiple systems that will help to slow down the aging process, and you'll have more vitality. So please go to my store and get the Boomer Boost. Make sure you use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, the market is open now. Now the S&P 500 is trading at 6,589, and the VIX is trading at 25.13. VIX is elevated, still at the 25 range, and may creep up even into the 35 range if we have bad news coming out of the Middle East. Now, right now, there are the resistance level for the S&P 500 is 6,600. The support level is 6,450. If that breaks, the next support level is the 38% retracement, which is going to be at 6,140. So right now, equities is a little bit positive, but we still have oil elevated. The last several trading sessions, it's been the opposite, where oil goes up, equities go down. Right now, we have equities going up and oil going up. How long that correlation lasts, who knows? Now, oil is trading at 112 right now, and natural gas is trading at 2.850. Currency markets are stable. Euro still trading at 115, and the Japanese yen is trading at 159. So that's relatively stable, and Bitcoin's trading just below 70,000. What this means is that it seems as though their institutional investors are starting to nibble at the equity market now. It's at the beginning of the quarter, the Q2, so their need to, and it's the beginning of the month, they need to show a return. Now, if the equities continue to go up, it'll help with their numbers at month end and potentially even quarter end for Q2. So I think this is part of the reason why some of these institutionals are coming in and buying in the equities, and why there is this positive correlation between oil and the equity market. All right, now what does this mean for how to trade oil in the current situation? Trump is going to speak tomorrow today. Today, Trump is going to be speaking at 1 p.m. Based on what Trump says, will determine if oil is going to be going down or up. If you just been paying attention to the news lately, it seems as though we are preparing for a ground offensive. Now, we'll listen into Fox News and this Pakistani framework, and maybe this is what Trump will talk about at 1 p.m. today. But if we get some news that there's de-escalation, oil's going to fall $4 or $5, maybe even more. If we get the sense that we're going to be hitting the bridges and the infrastructure, the energy infrastructure, oil is going to continue to remain high, and it may even trade for WTI. It may approach 120 in the near term. So if you think that oil is going to continue to go up, you should be taking a look at the ETF UCO. It's a 3 times leveraged ETF. If you think oil is going to go down, you want to take a look at SCO. That's a 3 times leveraged shorting oil. All right. It's very volatile because of the news, but I personally think that there's a higher probability of ground offensive, and therefore oil is going to go up. But the problem comes in is the moment Trump says something, quote, positive to de-escalate the war effort, oil can rapidly go down quickly. Very, very quick. It can go down $4, $5, $8 a barrel, and that could really affect your long position. So it's very difficult to trade because of these large candle moves that are happening in the oil market. So with that, again, in terms of broad index, Russell or the S&P 500, start buying. I have a year-end target of 7,400 to 7,800 for the S&P 500. All right. If you buy now, you're going to be able to make good return and probably beat the actual benchmark for January to December, because you're being able to play into the volatility of the crisis for the equities. But that's my recommendation. So with that, let's listen into this Pakistani framework to end the war in Iran. This may be brought up at 1 o'clock today by Trump.
This is live in Tel Aviv, where Israeli forces have just confirmed the death of an RGC head of intelligence. He's also a brigadier general as well. Trey, what can you tell us?
Yeah, guys, good morning. In that operation over the weekend, nothing short of historic. I've been talking with U.S. and Israeli officials, and they say there's no other country that could have successfully extracted that airman from deep in Iranian territory. The spy craft behind the scenes, we'll learn more in the days ahead, but really remarkable. We're also learning of another U.S. and Israeli victory overnight. A senior Israeli official telling Fox News that Majid Kadimi, the intelligence chief for the IRGC, was killed in a strike early this morning. Kadimi wasn't just any figure, I'm told. He was effectively the number 2 within the IRGC, one of the senior commanders who managed to survive multiple attempts on his life over the past year. He oversaw the intelligence apparatus that was used to target U.S. forces and allies across the region. Now, this comes as there is talk of diplomacy once again across the Middle East. Yesterday, I spoke with President Trump, and he said he's confident about the possibility of a deal even as early as today to end this conflict. But he said if there's no agreement, quote, you're going to see bridges and power plants dropping all over their country. If they don't make a deal and fast, I'm considering blowing everything up and taking over the oil. Now, a new report today in Reuters says a framework to end hostilities has been put together by Pakistan and exchanged with Iran and the U.S. overnight, outlining a 2-tier approach with an immediate ceasefire followed by a comprehensive agreement. Despite this talk of diplomacy, there are new U.S. and Israeli strikes that are targeting the Iranian regime. And again, we are tracking the latest developments after that successful rescue of an airman over the weekend in southwest Iran. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu releasing a post on X yesterday saying, quote, I spoke earlier with President Trump and personally congratulated him on his bold decision and a perfectly executed American mission to rescue the downed pilot from enemy territory. The president expressed his appreciation for Israel's help I am deeply proud that our cooperation on and off the battlefield is unprecedented and that Israel could contribute to saving a brave American warrior. We're also tracking the incoming Iranian fire against Israel, multiple ballistic missile barrages overnight, and on Sunday, 4 people were killed in the northern Israeli city of Haifa. You can see this drone video, the aftermath of a direct impact in that Israeli city. As this is taking place, the Israelis say they believe the Iranians still have the ability to launch missiles and drones at their country. But as Operation Epic Fury continues and the Americans and the Israelis hammer the military apparatus of the Iranian regime, it becomes more and more difficult for Iran to respond. Guys?
Great job out there, Trey.
Yeah,
Thanks, Trey.
incredible. So knowledgeable. So this has brought up a lot of conversations about NATO and what is the future of NATO now if we don't have countries that are supporting us. You have Spain that closed its airspace to U.S. military aircraft that's involved in this Iranian conflict. And earlier, Madrid refused to allow the U.S. to use joint operated bases. And Ari Fleischer had a message. NATO is going to look a lot different going forward because they're not supporting us.
Well, absolutely. And, you know, Ari was right when he leaned into the fact that the eastern side of NATO countries are leaning in. Countries like Poland, who are the only country that give more money to their GDP on defense than even the U.S., compared to Spain and France and countries like that. Here's what he said. He said, when this is over, the western part of NATO will never be the same. Spain, England, France, and Italy have sold us out, as they too often have a history of doing. Eastern European nations are the heart of NATO. They spend money on defense, know how to fight, and love the U.S. France particularly deserves fault and blame, from supporting China and Russia at the UN to denying Americans overflight rights. They're doing what they've always done, showing weakness while cutting deals with terrorists. The reason the U.S. has a Marine Corps and Navy is, unlike France, who refused to pay a ransom to Barbary pirates. France is always happy to cut a deal. Wars have unintended consequences as nations show their true colors. NATO will never be the same, and Western European weakness and acquiescence is the cause.
We are witnessing the great American comeback right now when it comes to the power on the global stage and reorganizing not only what's happening in the Middle East, but with NATO as well. And the sad thing about all of this is we always, I thought, could depend on the Europeans when we were in conflict. Many of them fought with us in Afghanistan and Iraq, but that's not the case right now. We see the Gulf states really taking the lead here and waging war. We would have never thought, and I think it's because of Donald Trump. He went to those countries, he promised them economic prosperity if they dropped the radical Islam. And many of those go, you see with the UAE, Saudi Arabia. Iran is the only partner, well, they were never a partner, that decided they wanted to hate us and Israel so much that they wouldn't come to the negotiating table. So the question is, does NATO, with Mark Rutte, who has been a friend of the president for a long time, does he convince the Europeans to do something before this ends? Because if they don't, that's the end of NATO.
Why do we pay into this? Why do we pay the most? Why are we involved in this if they're not going to protect us or allow us to use their airspace on our bases that we own in their countries? So if they're not going to support us, why are we even a part of this?
No, and I think you laid it out perfectly, Lawrence, because ultimately President Trump is testing NATO countries, European countries, to see, like, I don't need you. With our military, we can open the Strait of Hormuz. We can do whatever we need to do. We have the finest, most capable military on the planet. But let's see if you'll get involved. Right. I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest.
All right. Equities is still just under 6,600. And again, 6,600 is a resistance level for the S&P 500. Again, a major support level at 6,450 and 6,140. So even if the equity market falls today, tomorrow, the next day, you should be buying. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the collagen. This will help to remodel your sore joints, either because of osteoarthritis or because of sports injury. You want to remodel it right away. The earlier you start to remodel your joint, the higher the chances of fully recovering. The longer you wait, the more damage to the cartilage. Now, what collagen does is it will block MMP3 and MMP13 enzymes that cause further erosion of the cartilage. It blocks those. So you will be able to start remodeling your cartilage and your cushioning. This also helps to helps to utilize collagen type 2 and glucosamine to remodel the cartilage. And it helps to utilize ACAN and chondroitin to build the cushioning of the joint. That's really important. It's not just cartilage. You want the cushioning of the joint and the fluid and the cushioning tissue to be able to have good joint health. Now, collagen will also block EP4, which reduces inflammation, and collagen will also help to reduce some of that pain that you may be feeling from that sports injury or from the arthritis. But it's really important to take every day and slowly use light resistance training and stretching exercises to rebuild and send those growth factor signals to rebuild that sore joint. Again, it's super important to start right away and not allow it to fester, because the longer you wait, the more damage actually happens with these joints. So it's really important. You can stack this with collagen. The collagen you can stack with the collagen, which is a powder. So the collagen is the liquid, which I have in my hand. The collagen is the powder that I have on my store. You can stack those together to help rebuild the joint. To get further relief from pain, you can get the super strong relief. This is a topical. You apply it on the joint that's causing you pain because of the arthritis or joint pain, and it will help to relieve that pain. This will also help with bruises, sprains, pulled muscles, even headaches. If you have a tension headache, just apply it on your neck, your temples, and your forehead, and it will relieve the headache. So this is very powerful. It works within about 90 seconds. You can stack it together. You can take them separately. It's up to you. But my recommendation is that you should be getting the collagen and take the collagen, stack them together, and do these really light stretching exercises and very, very light resistance training on the joint to help to send those signals to remodel. This will help to build your joints. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5 to get $5 off any order. The link is in the description. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, with that, let's listen into CNBC about economic data.
For today, I can confirm as well. I mean, not news, because it was always thought to be the case, which is Paramount's going to raise as much as $24 billion from
this is Time Warner
investors,
this is
such as Saudi Arabia and others. That was always the plan as part of the more than $44 billion in equity.
Saudi's still giving money away.
Obviously, Larry Ellison, the largest single contributor, but they're still apparently there. The question, or why perhaps is something that would be newsworthy, is simply because of what's been going on. And I see questions about their wherewithal. There is a long story today in the Wall Street Journal about Saudi Arabia in general and all the enormous expenditures, of course, that country has undertaken, whether it be NEOM and many others, and things it's needed to pull back on, given the loss of revenues that's going on right now in part. I would just point out, when it comes to those Paramount investors, they are putting the money in at $16 a share, well above the current stock price. Well,
all right, so we're gonna go to another broadcast here. Let's talk about the CIA deception campaign that was used to help rescue the weapons specialist from the F-15.
About the CIA deception campaign used to get him out of the country.
The agency had sources spread leaks through Iran that U.S. forces had already located the missing airman and were moving him out of the country. These rumors confused the Iranian searchers and gave the CIA time to use specialized techniques to find him. The CIA picked up a beacon signal, which they were initially concerned was an Iranian trap. But once they determined it was not, they were able to locate and rescue that airman back to safety. Founder of Grable Rescue, Brian Stern, joins me now. Brian, you know, it is one thing for us to talk about something like this, entirely different to live it out, which you have multiple times. So given the details of what we know so far, and many of them are fascinating, what stands out to you about this rescue mission?
The big thing with this mission is the integration of the joint force, the conventional military, the special operations, our U.S. Special Operations Forces, and also the intelligence community, all operating in harmony, and foreign partners. Certainly, the Israelis had a part to play here as well. The deception piece of this operation, I think it's super cool that it's out there at Grable when we do these, when we do operations like this. Maria Karina Machado is one. Kirilo Alexandrov from Russia is another one. Deception against the enemy is always a central tenet to doing these operations because they are very dangerous. They are the resources of the enemy tend to be vast, and we got to remember it's their terrain. So doing all kinds of tricks to get them out of the way so we can have a better rescue and a better extraction is always key.
Is there a moment, Brian, during an operation like this that is considered the riskiest part?
I get asked this question all the time. My blood pressure doesn't go down until the helicopters land safely and we're done. Very often, when these operations happen, when we do an operation like this and we get our objective, we over the radio we say jackpot. You say jackpot, jackpot, jackpot. And very often in the command center, when that happens, everyone starts high-fiving each other because that means that you got the target, you got the objective, you got the isolated person. You need to remember, you still have to get home. If I'm calling jackpot on the radio, that means that my team and I are still behind enemy lines. We just happen to now have our package with us. Getting home is often the harder part. The exfil tends to be harder because we've gone loud. Things have gotten more complicated, not less complicated. So my blood pressure always spikes as soon as we call jackpot.
Yeah.
A minute for that is because I know everyone's very excited and not paying attention. We got to get the team back on track.
Yeah.
Remind them we've got to get home.
Brian, my blood pressure is spiking just listening to what that would be like, and it does sound like the back half of the mission could be even more complicated than the beginning part. Because you're right, your identity is revealed in the fact that you're shooting down and there's a helicopter and all of that. And I want to go to the colonel himself because he climbed 7,000 feet up a ridge and remained hidden there for nearly 48 hours. And he used his survival, evasion, resistance, and escape training to evade capture. So it sounds like he also had a big hand in rescuing himself in following this training.
Yeah, so this is, I think, also central to this operation and an important point. And I'll give you an example. My team and I have conducted 809 missions in just over 4 years. That turns into 8,800 people, give or take. Every single one of them have to play an active role in their safety and their survival. It's extremely important. In this case, you have a full bird Air Force colonel, who is very well trained, extremely seasoned. He's been through multiple certifications and recertifications for SEER school, which we all go to. There's a bunch of different ones of them. There's refresher training, all that good stuff. This is a seasoned pilot who is trained for seasoned air crew who is trained for exactly this eventuality. The challenge in this particular case is, while as seasoned as he is, he's still a full bird colonel. What does that mean? He's probably in his later years. He's got gray hair. People, when we conceptually think about flight crew, we think about Top Gun and Maverick and young bucks. This is a full bird colonel. His next rank is general. So he's probably a little senior when the pictures come out, and I'm sure that they will. It'll be kind of funny because you're going to see someone with with a little senior in his years.
Understood.
That's like me, guy.
He knew what
So-
to do
so-
there, though. Yeah. Hey, Brian, really quickly, just because we're running out a little bit of time here, I wish we had more, but I do want to get to this because one aircraft involved in this extraction was left behind after reportedly getting stuck in the mud, and then they destroyed it. Although that aircraft is still behind enemy lines, is that something that we should worry about?
I don't think so. The boys do what's called a bit. They blew it in place. The C-130 got stuck in the sand. This has happened before, and again, it speaks to the remarkable planning of the from a special operations perspective or the air perspective. The idea that a plane can get stuck in the sand in the middle, but behind it, hundreds of miles behind enemy lines, and still we didn't lose anybody, and still the objective was secured, and still everything worked out. We are the only military in the world that can lose an aircraft, a big aircraft, the Exfil aircraft, in the middle of an operation and still not skip a beat and succeed and win.
Yeah,
It really is.
It really is remarkable, Brian. And then more aircraft had to come in to bring those service members home who were on the originally on the aircraft that was eventually destroyed. President Trump's going to hold a news conference with military later today after pulling off this most daring rescue that certainly the details sound like something out of a movie. Brian, thank you so much for joining us to talk about this. You're the absolute perfect person to break all of this down. We appreciate your time this morning.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News links.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the heirloom barley. Heirloom barley will help to detoxify your body, bring down inflammation, and soak up free radicals with superoxide dismutase. This is very powerful. Take it every day. This is a month supply. It's a powder. You mix it with soft foods, filtered water, a smoothie, milk. There's many ways to take this. I take it with hummus, but take it every day. And what this will do is it'll help to boost up your immune system, your endocrine system, reduce inflammation. That means that it's going to help with your cardiovascular health. It's going to help with your brain function by bringing down inflammation. Is super important for brain health. And this will also help with the health of your joints by keeping the inflammation down. So if you want to slow down the aging process and get healthy, take the heirloom barley or the gladiator barley. The difference between the gladiator barley and the heirloom barley is that the gladiator barley will help to build muscle. You can stack this with Boomer Boost or take it separately. It's a very high quality product that you should be taking. And again, you could stack this with the collagen and the collagen and do a little bit of resistance training to help build up the joints. And again, this brings down inflammation, and bringing down inflammation and soaking up free radicals are super important to slow down the aging process. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the heirloom barley. All right. CSIS just released another video they just released it 54 minutes ago. How the war in Iran is impacting global energy infrastructure. So we're going to listen in on this. They do a great job with their
Israeli
slides.
forces or bases. They have included strikes on or threats to the United States and Israel have devastated Iran's military capabilities over the past month. Iran has counterattacked, and some of these attacks have focused not just on U.S. and Israeli forces or bases. They have included strikes on or threats to the region's critical energy supplies, due primarily to Iran's interruption of shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, where 1/5 of the world's oil supplies transit. The war has triggered what the International Energy Agency has labeled the, quote, largest supply disruption in the history of the global oil market, end quote. Restrictions to the region's energy production capacity and transportation flows have had a dramatic impact on global fuel and gas prices. It also demonstrates the interconnected nature of industrial bases around the world. Reliable, resilient energy facilities for the United States, for instance, are essential to the power our economic needs and our national defense. To unpack this intersection of U.S. energy infrastructure and the defense industrial base, we will be speaking to my colleague, Joseph Mycutt, the director of the Energy Security and Climate Change Program here at CSIS. He is the lead author of a recent report on this issue. As usual, I'm your host, Jerry McGinn, and welcome back to another episode of All About the Base. Welcome to the show, Joseph. It's really great to have you.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to talking about the war, its implications, and how it demonstrates many of the themes we talk about in our recent report.
Joseph, the conflict in Iran really has taken a different turn in the last couple of weeks, as these headlines clearly show. The impact on oil prices, energy shocks, and the like. These threats on energy sources in the Persian Gulf and to the safe transit of shipping in the region have roiled markets and created a great deal of instability. Why is the Strait of Hormuz so critical for energy supplies? And what impact is it having today?
The Strait of Hormuz is the definition of a choke point when you think about the global energy system. 20% roughly of global oil flows out of that strait, produced by Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. So as that shipping is nearly entirely shut down, you have a just remarkable market effect. Now, countries in the region have managed to divert some flows to other ports outside of the Gulf, but any way you cut it, it's impossible to imagine the modern global oil market without passage of the Strait of Hormuz. Compound that, Jerry, with now a significant role for the region in global LNG, liquefied natural gas markets and exports as well, and a variety of other commodities related to the petrochemical and base materials industries.
Gotcha. Now, what makes this global energy shock different from like previous OPEC, the OPEC oil embargo in 1973 and the like?
Well, this is not a coordinated effort, right? This is Iran shutting down through threats, shipping through the straits, right? We actually haven't seen that much kinetic activity against shipping. Rather, this is a sort of blockade in effect. Ships are unwilling to make the passage, they cannot get insurance to do so, and there is a general level of concern that were commercial activity to resume at its old volumes, you would be losing ships and lives in the process. Now, why is this different from the past? Well, it is uncoordinated, it is larger, and I would say one of the most important things that people here in the United States are missing is that principally Asian markets are going to feel the disruption first. So in the 1970s, you had an oil embargo, which had profound political and economic effects in Western countries. That's why the OPEC countries then created the IEA as sort of an offset to OPEC. Now, the biggest disruptions we're seeing are in the Asia-Pacific region because the U.S. is now a large exporter of oil and global markets have...
I just want to disrupt his presentation just for this quick update. The S&P 500 has broke the 6,600 barrier, so that's really important to maintain above 6,600 for today's close. VIX is now trading in the 24 handle, and at the same time as the S&P 500 broke the 6,600 barrier, WTI futures started to fall down. Right now, the WTI futures are trading at 111.95. And natural gas is still trading in the 2.8 handle. It's trading at 2.842.
Around all the growth going on in Asia. So look for that region to experience shocks first, and then through global pricing, U.S. consumers will feel the higher prices that we've seen evolve over the last few weeks.
But so there's little direct impact on the Strait of Hormuz on U.S. sourcing, I believe, right? It's, as you say, Asia. But is this going to trigger a kind of a long-term shift on sourcing of fuel and energy sources, do you think, or is it too early to tell?
It's too early to say how profound that shift will be, but it's certain that there's going to be some shift, right? It's hard to imagine any settlement to this war at this point leading to less risk premia on shipping through the Gulf. Countries are going to look to secure energy supply from other regions. Countries in the Gulf region are going to look for other ways to get their shipments out, by pipeline to other ports. The world economy cannot be held hostage to Iran with so much immediate control over the strait.
Now, you've really presciently, actually, have done some work looking at these kind of issues and how they impact the world today. And so, talk to us a little about this, the work you've recently announced.
Well, that question actually reverts a little bit to you, Jerry. I mean, and the headlines I see, because I'm what I don't want to.
Breaking news here: the ISM non-manufacturing PMI went lower than expected. So this is bad for economic news here.
So we can now officially confirm that Treasury has chosen BNY, Bank of New York Mellon, to manage the Trump accounts. It's also selecting Robinhood to help as well. It's a big deal because this was a competitive process. Part of the job here is designing and creating an app for people to track their accounts. Remember, these Trump accounts, they're now law, where anyone with a baby born after January of last year can apply starting this tax season, and there have already been millions of applications to receive $1,000 in an S&P 500.
Treasury's been running this process to pick which financial institution will be able to manage them. And I'm told it was competitive, but in the end, BNY won, and they will officially be contracted by the Treasury. There's no performance fees here. It's more just bragging rights and some soft marketing and also those contracting fees. And it kind of fits with the America 250 theme. BNY is America's oldest bank, founded by Alexander Hamilton.
I mean, we have the greatest military in the world. You know, we spend $1 trillion a year on our military, and we're fighting a tiny power like Iran. So it feels like we already won militarily, or at least we did as much damage as we could in the first few days. But they continue to drag this on. They continue to make this painful for the U.S. and for the world, more importantly, as they control the Strait of Hormuz. When or how can we change that?
It's very difficult when you're facing an adversary like this, right? Because the U.S. has this aura of invincibility. So if you were trying to compare 11,000 or 12,000 sorties that we have flown as the United States against targets, right? That's pretty significant when you only look at about 30 or so of our aircraft, most of them unmanned, obviously, that have been interdicted anyway. So you're talking about less than 1% of an interdiction rate. So you're still doing very, very well there. But every time that makes national news and international news that there's been something that's happened to the United States military, it automatically gives Iran an upper hand. So there's very, very few upsides when it comes to this asymmetric threat where we're at right now, because you're not exactly facing the Iranian regime itself. You're not facing a conventional force like you would with a near-peer adversary like China and Russia.
I wonder, though, if we need to have two separate conversations. One about what's happening with the war, and then the other what's happening with the Strait. Because right now they've been really interconnected. The hotter the war, maybe the more difficult it is to move through the Strait. A lot of people over the weekend were reading a new research report from Citrini, who sent an analyst to the Strait of Hormuz itself. And one of the outcomes they said was that regardless of what's happening in the war, it's actually quite orderly through the Strait of Hormuz, that Iranian forces have a system for charging a toll and getting ships through. There were reports that a French ship went through, that a Japanese flagship went through, Iraq saying that it is exempt from some of the restrictions moving through the Strait of Hormuz, telling its Asian partners that it can get through. Colonel, are we entering a different environment for the Strait of Hormuz that, yes, it is still controlled by Iran, but some ships are selectively being let through?
I think so. I think when you look at, even when President Trump talked over the weekend, he was talking about his objectives and especially on the military side, getting after military stockpiles. He was trying to make sure that Iran could not use a nuclear weapon. What he did not mention was the Straits of Hormuz. At that point in time, I think he is taking more of a look on that and saying that you do need to separate them out, because militarily we are doing what we want to do in Iran to dismantle their military capability as well as their military industrial base, but none of that has to do with the safe passage of vessels through the Strait of Hormuz. It's one of the reasons why he was looking for NATO partners. He was looking for help from the Gulf states as well, to be able to provide some of that assistance in that area. Iran is doing the pay-for-toll piece. You see that there's actually been an increase. I think 15 vessels in the last 24 hours have actually gone through the Straits, which is still 90% less than pre-conflict, but it is obviously a much larger move in the right direction compared to where it was probably 2 to 3 weeks ago.
All right, Colonel, thanks very much for joining us. Retired Army Colonel Wayne Sanders, now with Bloomberg Intelligence. Joining us now is Indriani D. FTSE Russell, head of global investment research. And Indrani, we continue to talk about the war so much, but on a headline by headline basis, it does seem to move markets, but it hasn't really hurt this.
All right, we're going to go back to the CSIS.
See, because what I don't want to worry about this oil issue is that the U.S. has spent a lot of its fancy munitions defending energy infrastructure and military assets from attacks from Iran. And you read pretty scary headlines about burning up a few years of production in a couple of weeks of conflict, and it raises questions about our long-term strategy. Where our work is a project we did in collaboration with folks here at CSIS in the security program, trying to estimate what would be the energy implications of revitalizing the American defense industrial base.
Gotcha, I understand. So within our industrial base, what are the most kind of energy intensive systems and raw materials to produce? In a wartime scenario, which capabilities make the most demand most energy on our infrastructure?
Well, let me tell you a little bit about the report as we call up our first chart. We looked at 3 different scenarios for revitalization of the defense industrial base. We looked at a baseline rate. This is defense production of today. We looked at a buildup rate, and that's like kind of what analysts and the Pentagon are asking for in terms of building up the defense industrial base as a deterrent. Maybe this could also be thought of roughly as our sort of rebuilding case post-Iran war. And then we looked at the war rate. And this was really meant to reflect, does the U.S. have an energy system and a defense industrial base that can survive a prolonged conflict of high volume or intensity, particularly with a peer nation such as China? And we looked at when we entered World War I and into World War II, we had energy shortages related to the shipbuilding and other defense production at that time. In World War II, the USG had actually a very specific strategy for energy so that we would not lose the defense industrial base part of that war. Now, the modern defense industrial base is, of course, very different, right? We're not thinking about shipbuilding as much. We're not thinking about large steel airframes. Instead, we're looking at unmanned systems, munitions, combat aircraft, and a little bit of naval vessels. So we took that modern defense production and broke it up into its constituent goods and identified 3 principal areas that we really probably need to be worried about in a sort of in a war rate or rebuilding scenario. That's electronics. So the semiconductors and chips that go into fancy unmanned systems, that's aluminum and steel.
Oh, those are significant. What are the primary concerns for U.S. energy production? Are there specific regions where the electric grid or natural gas production is under particular threat?
It's a great question, Jerry. Thank you. I mean, one of the findings of this report was that even in a war rate scenario, we have plenty of energy in the United States. It's really a question of concentration and geography. So we looked at where those constituent parts, the steel, the semiconductors, the aluminum, and we've got titanium here filling out our quadrant, where they're produced and what the reliability and access risk is for expanding production in those places. And you'll note that the report really takes a look at 2 key areas where the energy system is already strained, where we expect continued and fast growth of the energy needed for data centers, and where much of our defense production is occurring at this base level. We looked at the regions that folks probably need to pay attention to or be worried about are this mid-Atlantic region here, so-called the PJM electricity market, and then Texas, where semiconductor manufacturing and steel making are both large parts of the industry. And while the electricity grid there and the natural gas grid as well, can accommodate a lot of growth, there's a lot of other sources of growth as well. And so the scenario we really need policymakers to be thinking about is one of long-term rebuilding of this industrial base. At the same time, we're experiencing economic growth in other sectors.
One of the sectors you mentioned we see a lot, particularly here in the national capital region, is around data centers, right? And the power that they need and they're very much used in AI applications and the like. So, how is that impacting the energy security in the United States?
The principal way that data centers are going to affect energy security, in particular, how it could affect our ability to expand the defense industrial base, is by creating excess demand in places that already have deliverability problems. Our report looks at that issue from both an electricity reliability standpoint, as well as what we call a gas deliverability standpoint. So natural gas is the sort of cornerstone of the electricity system here in the United States. It can be important for industrial activity just as a source of heat or chemistry as well. And in the places where we see particular growth for the defense industrial base, the mid-Atlantic here and in Texas, data centers are already straining the energy system, and you have gas deliverability and electric reliability challenges emerging over the next 5 years in both those regions. So as we think about hardening the energy system, not just for economic growth, but for the defense industrial base, we see the same troubled regions.
I see. Beyond what we've talked about here, what do you see are the most pressing energy-related needs for our industrial base?
For the industrial base generally, even if you extend beyond the defense industrial base, we've done quite a bit of work looking at, what is a factory owner, what is a firm that makes stuff in the United States, what do they seek when they're looking to locate a facility in the U.S., right? We perceive over the last 5 years, significant increase in manufacturing, construction spending. People are reshoring into the United States for a variety of reasons. They're looking in our assessment for a few different things. First, you need to be able to interconnect your facility. In some of the more troubled regions in the United States, it can take 8 years to bring a large load onto the grid through today's connection queue. That needs to be sped up. They're looking for a high degree of reliability. Oftentimes, these facilities, like semiconductor manufacturing, for instance, they need a level of reliability which is very, very high, even compared to the United States grid, which is very reliable by global standards. Because if they have to shut down production, they lose millions, billions of dollars of value having to restart that whole thing. And I'll also say they're looking for carbon intensity or some measure of sustainability, especially if the stuff they make has to reach consumer markets, right? Consumers want to buy green. Consumers or buyers in Europe, Japan, Asia want to buy lower intensity goods, often have to pay duties on carbon intense goods. So a third factor that we've seen is the sort of carbon intensity or the emissions associated with production in that region. The story actually here is potentially quite optimistic. The United States has bountiful energy resources, both in terms of land we can use to develop renewables and natural gas, which is, compared to global standards, still a low emissions energy source. But we need to make sure we have the requisite infrastructure that we can both provide electricity and provide gas reliability so the two can work together to realize an overall excellent system.
Wow, fascinating. Joseph, thank you so much for all your incredible insights during this discussion. Be sure to check out his full report and the video recording of his recent event.
All right, we're going to go to some other clips, but before I do, I want to give some advice about how to improve your brain. All right, there's a book that came out recently. I think it was published last year. Let's just double check here. It was this year. It was published this year, 2026, and it's called The Invincible Brain. Now, this author is an MD and Ph.D. and talks about how to holistically help with brain function and reduce the chances of dementia. All right, and there's different types of dementia. There's different types of Alzheimer's. There are genes which is called APOE genes. There's 3 types. There's APOE2, APOE3, and 4. The E4 is the Alzheimer's gene, all right? And you get 2 copies of APOE, usually, all right, for most people, all right? And that's 1 copy from your mother or 1 copy from your father. Now, there are cases where you could get more than 1 copy, but let's not go into the details about that. But the thing is that if you have EPOE4, 2 copies of it, one from your mother, one from your father, the chances of getting Alzheimer's increases radically. But it's also environmental. And there are ways to mitigate the actual early onset of Alzheimer's, even late onset of Alzheimer's. And there are other dementia type pathologies like Lewy body, late Parkinson's, ischemic dementia, or what they call vascular dementia. So there's a lot of different types of dementia, and it's also based on your genes and your epigenetics, not just your genes, your genome, but how certain genes are methylated. So if you have less methylation of your genes and you have more youthful gene expression, chances are you're going to be able to get into your later years without major cognitive decline. So this book is really important to read, and it goes into detail of certain things that you could do that mitigate the actual issues of dementia. All right? It's a holistic approach. He's an MD, Ph.D. that wrote this book, but he's proving the things that I'm telling you what to do, that I've been saying for years. Now, he published this book in 2026. All right? I've been saying for close to 6 years what to do. He proved what I've been telling everybody. All right? So the key here is keep inflammation down, improve your diet, drink filtered water, detoxify your body regularly, do resistance training and cardiovascular training, stretching and balancing exercises, learn new things, challenge yourself, read and write, talk to people, reduce your usage on social media, have some sort of spirituality or some sort of mindfulness, sleep. Proper sleep is super important. And when you do these things with proper supplementation, you are going to improve your brain function. Now, a lot of people don't realize your kidneys and your liver, your musculature, your heart, your lungs, if they're not functioning properly, your brain won't function properly. Let me give you an example. With kidneys and liver, if they're not functioning properly, they're not filtering out your blood. And therefore, you have toxins that are building up in your blood that can lead to the vascular lining to expand and start to leak at the blood-brain barrier, leading to toxins to get into the brain and cause inflammation that causes problems and builds up amyloid, and the neuron connections start to recede. That's just with bad kidneys and liver. Even if you have APOE2 gene for, a lot of people don't know this, but the APO2 and APO3 are genes for preventing early onset of dementia, right? So the chances of getting early onset of dementia, if you have E2 or E3, is radically diminished. If you have E4, then early onset of dementia, or Alzheimer's, I should say, increases radically. So even if you have E2 or E3, and you have bad kidneys or a bad liver, you're increasing your chances of dementia or Alzheimer's. Why? Because you're building up toxins. So this is the reason why having a healthy liver, having healthy kidneys, drinking filtered water, staying away from processed foods, staying away from sugary substances, because diabetes can cause problems with your liver and your kidneys, and will lead to problems with your brain function. So this is the reason why a holistic approach and proper supplementation is super important. And this is all proven. What I've been saying for 6 years has been proven in this book that was published this year. All right. Now, in addition, your bone density also helps. Your actual the health of your bones helps with brain function. Now, the mechanism isn't quite understood yet, but it's thought that osteocalcin, is it calcin or calcin? I think it's osteocalcin, is helping to protect the actual neuron, because there's a correlation between brittle bones and dementia. All right, so having denser bone actually will help with brain function. Now, the overall mechanism is still in study, but building denser bone is super important. Now, building muscles, having more musculature, reducing atrophy is super important for brain function also. Why? Because it's creating myokines that will help to increase connection for these myokines, actually help to increase the neuroplasticity, the positive neuroplasticity that you need. So you have more dendritic connections. You have more connections with your neural networks. So you'll be thinking faster. In addition, by building up muscle, you'll actually improve your cardiovascular health. So when your heart is healthier, you get better blood flow to the brain. Now, my father died from dementia, ischemic dementia, which is poor blood flow to the hippocampus. So improving your heart will also help with brain function. So a lot of people don't realize. Now, what about the lung? Lungs are really important. People that have COPD or have restrictive, some sort of restrictive pulmonary disease, what will happen is that you're not getting proper oxygen into your bloodstream, and that will affect brain function. Very similar to ischemic dementia. In addition, when your vascular system within your lung is inflamed, toxins will get into the bloodstream, cause inflammation at the blood-brain barrier level, and lead to a leaky situation where you have these toxins getting into the brain and causing problems, inflammation, buildup of plaques and tau, and eventually neurological decline. So lung health helps, good lung health helps brain function, because you get better oxygen and you're reducing toxins that are getting into the bloodstream because of inflamed lung tissue in the vascular system around the alveoli will lead to toxins to build up in the bloodstream. So lung health will help with brain function. Kidney health will help with brain function. Heart health will help with brain function. Liver health will help with brain function. Bone density will help with brain function. The mechanism is still in research to try to understand the full mechanism. Musculature will help with brain health because it's helping increase myokines. So if you've been paying attention to me for the last 6 years, I've been telling you how to slow down the aging process. And there's a lot of people out there that's saying, oh, it can't be done and blah, blah, blah. This is what I am saying is cutting edge research that is just starting to get to mainstream. And I've been doing, the reason why I've been so cutting edge on this is because I started looking into this since I was 16 years old. So many decades I've been playing around with this. So if you pay attention to me, you're going to be able to slow down the aging process. And I just talked about just the brain function. But there's a lot of other things to improve that I've been saying, like your immune system, your endocrine system. You take my advice, you're going to get healthy, and you won't need a allopathic doctor. You won't need it. You won't need it. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the Clarity Factor, very powerful neurostat. This will help you to concentrate on tasks, get rid of that brain fog, and over time, you're going to get better dendritic connections for your neurons. And the more connections you have, the more cognition you have, the faster you think, the better your memory. It's a very powerful stack. Drink it with filtered water. Take it every day. Now, some people take it in the morning. Some people take it in the evening. I have a protocol for myself where I take it twice a day. All right. Myotrol. This will help to build muscle, reduce atrophy. Why? Because it helps with the gene expression. Now, myotrol has polyphenols, flavonoids, and lignans to help with that gene expression. You do some resistance training, it'll help you to build muscle, help you to maintain the muscle, and help to boost up your mitochondria so you have more ATP to maintain that muscle. Now, when you turn age 40, male or female, your gene expression changes. You are starting to methylate the genes that help to build your muscle. So you don't want the atrophy. So you need to take supplementation to slow down this methylization. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and build up that muscle. Now, if you're an athlete, younger or older, you'll benefit from this. Increase your strength for your sport. But if you're 40 years of age or older, you will benefit also. Do a little bit of resistance training. You don't have to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. But by improving your musculature, you're going to have better bone density. You're going to have better venous return flow because your posture is better. You'll be more active. So you'll have more vitality and your lymphatic flow will improve. So you're helping your immune system and your cardiovascular system by getting more muscle. On top of it, because of the myokines that are being produced when you're building muscle, it's helping your brain function because it's neuroprotective and it allows for dendritic connections to improve. So you'll think better. Now, they've done studies, autopsies, people that have more muscle versus ones that don't have more brain volume, more connections in the gray matter, and less inflammation, less micro strokes and all this stuff. So it's really important. People don't understand. Building muscle actually helps with your brain. But you get this added benefit of helping your immune system and helping your venous return flow and your musculature and your bone density. And just having more vitality. So please go to my store, get the Myotrol, get the Clarity Factor, stack them together to help slow down the aging process. And the things that I've been telling people to do for the last 6 years have been proven in this book. All right? This individual is an adjunct professor at Johns Hopkins University, MD, Ph.D. I've been proven that what I've been telling people to do to slow down the aging process and to help your brain health is right. So please go to my store. Follow my advice. This is what I have been doing for years. Now, if you don't want to follow my advice, maybe you turn into Alex Jones, a crazy conspiracy theorist that looks like he's aging 10 times faster than he should. Or do you want to take the advice of Dr. Paul Cottrell? It's up to you. It's up to you. But I'm not wrong. And I've been proven correct. Okay? So with that, let's continue on with the news, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description of this video. All right, let's listen into Fox News.
We're back with Operation Epic Fury, and the U.S. and Iran reportedly receiving a two-phase ceasefire plan drafted by Pakistan. But President Trump is warning there will be strikes on power plants and bridges if the Strait of Hormuz isn't reopened by tomorrow's deadline. Matt Finn joining us now from Dubai with more details. Good morning, Matt.
Good morning, Griff. The AP and other outlets are reporting that Egyptian, Pakistani, and Turkish mediators have presented the United States and Iran with a proposed 45-day ceasefire plan that includes opening the Strait of Hormuz, which is far in the distance in the Persian Gulf behind me. Now, that proposal was reportedly sent to the U.S. and Iran last night. The Strait of Hormuz has become a key issue for any peace deal, as Iran is wreaking havoc on commerce and law-abiding ships trying to pass through that strait. Also last night, President Trump warning Iran of an 8 p.m. deadline tonight for Iran to come to the table where there could be many U.S. attacks tomorrow. The president writing Tuesday will be power plant day and bridge day all wrapped up in one in Iran. There will be nothing like it. Open the blinking strait, you crazy blink, or you'll be living in hell. Just watch. Praise be to Allah, President Donald J. Trump. Now, over the weekend, I met in person here with Dr. Samar Gargash. He is referred to as His Excellency here in this country. He's an advisor to the president here. Dr. Gargash tells me that if the United States presents the right plan, the UAE, the country that we are in, will join the United States in using force on the Strait of Hormuz. Dr. Gargash saying, quote, "We're not ready to act as a maritime force, but we will join any American-led effort, international effort, to secure navigation in the Strait of Hormuz. We are ready to play our part." Also, Dr. Gargash telling us that he considers the United States the UAE's greatest security ally, and that the UAE is ready to, quote, double down on its relationship with the United States right now. Griff.
Matt Finn, live for us in Dubai. Matt, thank you very much. And with that, let's bring in Fox News contributor Byron York joining us. Byron, good morning. Let's just dive right into where Matt was talking about this reported possible ceasefire deal, but it comes with the backdrop of the most successful daring rescue mission in U.S. history, really showing Iran that there is nothing that we don't have the ability to successfully do. Where do you see things headed?
Well, first of all, the rescue mission sends a huge message to our enemies and also to American forces. Obviously, to our enemies, it does show exactly what you just said, which is the United States can reach anywhere and do anything. And to our forces, it shows the United States Army or the United States military is always behind you, always behind you. That's an extremely important message to send to the troops. Now, you know, as far as what is going on, as far as the Straits of Hormuz are concerned, is that the president's Easter morning message clearly threatened attacks on Iranian power plants, on bridges, if they did not essentially open the strait by 8 o'clock Eastern time tomorrow night. Now, last week, the president was talking about getting other nations involved and having them police the strait if it were to reopen. So I think the president has maintained a lot of unpredictability on this, and I would imagine the Iranians have no idea what he's actually going to do.
Well, and he certainly was direct and straightforward in his social media post yesterday. But you talk about messaging, Byron. I think that's such an interesting thing. What message do you think this sends to NATO? Because you talk about other countries being involved, and I thought Ari Fleischer had a really poignant post yesterday talking about that NATO may never be the same. It was a lengthy list, but he's basically laying out the fact that NATO will never be the same because the Western countries, Italy, Spain, France, they have not owned up to their obligations under NATO, while the Eastern side certainly has, with Poland being the only one that spends more money than the U.S. on their GDP defense.
Yeah, this his posts, Ari's post, set off a number of arguments, but clearly what he was saying is that some of the Western European NATO countries, France, Spain, the United Kingdom, by their initial refusal to cooperate with the United States in this, had really set a terrible precedent for themselves. And here again, President Trump was not asking them to send troops. He was not asking them to engage in attacks. He was asking for overflight rights and the right to use air bases, which the United States basically finances anyway. And yet those nations refused even that level of cooperation. And what Ari Fleischer was doing was contrasting those nations with the nations in Eastern Europe, which in the much more recent years had experienced Soviet domination and knew what it is like to have an enemy very close to you, and their cooperation with the United States. So what Fleischer was saying is there could be big changes coming in NATO, a shift in power, some sort of change, but something is going on in NATO.
We may learn more from the president himself at that 1 p.m. press conference today. Byron York, thank you for taking time.
Thank you, Griff.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News
All right,
latest.
before we go to the next video, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the ashwagandha root. Ashwagandha root will help to bring down cortisol levels and help to control blood glucose levels. That's really important. That's going to help boost up your immune system and also help with your cardiovascular system. And like I've been saying, by improving your cardiovascular system, you're also helping with your brain function. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the ashwagandha root. Now, lignans. Lignans will help to bring down inflammation, soak up free radicals. And when you do that, you're helping your cardiovascular system, your endocrine system, your immune system, your brain function, because you're bringing down inflammation. A lot of people don't realize that with the ashwagandha root, by bringing down elevated cortisol levels that are chronically elevated, you're helping the brain function, because cortisol that's elevated chronically will destroy tissue. Well, you don't want that, all right? Plus, high glucose levels causes inflammation. Well, you want to control that with the ashwagandha root. So this is the reason why you want to stack these together. Lignans will soak up those free radicals and bring down inflammation. That's going to help with the immune system and the endocrine system, the cardiovascular system. They'll even help with your joint health. But brain function too. Stack them together to slow down the aging process. I just gave you the formula, right, to slow down aging. But a lot of people, what they do is they don't pay attention, they don't buy the supplements, they don't take it regularly, and don't be surprised that you're on medication. And when you're on medication, guess what? You have side effects, and it costs you more money, and you won't have you won't have the vitality that you should have. My protocol works. Slow down the aging process. Now, please go to my store, get the ashwagandha root, get the lignans, stack them together. They also stack really well with the turmeric, which also soaks up free radicals and brings down inflammation. And you get all these different systems will start to perform better. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5, all caps, discount 5, and you get $5 off any order. All right. Now what I want to see here is
Dan Ives at Wedbush Securities says, with the Iran war, investors should be focused on the longer term.
This will pass. And when it passes, tech stocks, I continue to believe that's where you want to be positioned, especially in some of these sell-offs that we've seen.
Right now, the S&P 500, 20 points higher, 6602 on the index. The Dow up 131 points, and the Nasdaq 118 points higher. That's up right now at 0.5%. And finally, this one from the Wall Street Journal. Apparently, people are reporting financial.
Stupid. I wish they didn't play the music so I don't get a strike for Copyright.
Award. Some sharing stories of sudden infusions of cash and new job openings. The song streams have surged, the number of streams in the U.S. increasing tenfold in the first half of March. Some users claim that listening to this song has brought them abundance and good fortune. I was listening to this song when I was filling out my bracket.
Oh yeah, that
So,
explains
it explains. We check the markets and other stuff right here on Bloomberg Radio all day long. I'm John Tucker, and that's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Scroll and pull.
All right, thank you so much, John Tucker. We have a new headline here. It's a red head, as we call it in the Bloomberg News world. Iran rejecting ceasefire, demands permanent end to the war. This is according to the official IRNA news agency. So as we have been hearing reports of countries like Pakistan, Egypt, and Turkey helping to push for a 45-day ceasefire with Iran. The U.S. obviously wants the Strait of Hormuz open. President Trump has extended this deadline to Tuesday, 8 p.m. Iran has made clear that it wants a definitive end to the war rather than merely a pause, whether it's for 45 days or shorter or longer. It wants a permanent end. Let's bring in Gautam Mukunda. He's a lecturer at the Yale School of Management and Bloomberg opinion contributor, joining us right now from Boston. And Gautam, I think this kind of makes the point for you that you have had all along here, which is there is a fundamental mismatch in a lot of what we're seeing as the Iran war enters its sixth week. U.S. operational capabilities and the U.S. strategy and goals for this conflict, and now what Iran and the U.S. seem to want when it comes to resolving this conflict. Talk us through what you think about this new headline we just told you about.
Right. So it's completely unsurprising because let's set out exactly what's happening here. Is the United States and Israel are attempting to coerce Iran into, in the United States' case, primarily first opening the Strait of Hormuz. We've seemed to have stopped talking about regime change. And in Israel's case, it's not entirely clear, but what the Israeli press is reporting is they basically seem to be pushing for a failed state, or essentially the collapse of the Iranian government. From the Iranians' perspective, what they're sort of saying is, hey, let's say we get a ceasefire, the Israelis and the Americans could just do this again in 6 months. The only tool we have to push back against them is the Strait of Hormuz. Why would we give up control of the Strait just to buy 6 months of peace when this could just happen all over again with six months from now? This doesn't make any sense, right? The United States is attempting to coerce the Iranians essentially into committing suicide because they're not going to give up their only tool of protection against American and Israeli strikes. I don't see how this is going to change.
So this brings back, I guess, the question people are asking on day one. What is the off-ramp for President Trump and this administration and U.S. and Israel here for this war?
I would say that the off-ramp is that they need to, at this point, they need to figure out some way to provide guarantees that this will not happen again, right? Some sort of a deal. The terms that have kind of been put out on the table basically look exactly like the Iran nuclear deal that Trump discarded in his first term, which is, ironic but unsurprising. But that's not the way the pressure is going, right? All of the dynamics of war, this is why you don't get into wars when you can avoid it, right? Why a war should never be the last choice, not the first one, because all the dynamics keep pushing towards escalation, right? Trump is putting out these tweets and increasing the range of targets he's hitting, and threatening to bomb Iran back into the Stone Age and go after electricity plants and desalination plants, and doing those things to inflict harm on civilian population, particularly water supplies, is a war crime. There's just no question about that. So all of those things are going. And at the same time, the Iranians have retaliatory options, right? They can use their own drones and their own missiles to go after desalination plants in the other Gulf countries, all of which, many of which, by the way, are much more dependent on desalination than Iran is. That's actually an asymmetric threat on the side of the Iranians. And if I were a Gulf country, I'd be really, really concerned about that.
What do you make of the news that we have seen more ships transiting through the Strait of Hormuz? 21 ships, according to Bloomberg reporting. Iraq, India, China's governments have negotiated passage for their ships. So it's not that traffic has returned to normal, but there is some traffic, and Iran is kind of instituting the system where these different ships pay tolls. We don't know the terms of these specific ships that have moved through, but there is something looking like some traffic has returned.
Yeah, so that's actually the Iranians improving their position, right? Like, not only is some flow through the Straits, it's flow through the States at the discretion of Iran, which was not the situation before the war. And just to make this worse, later on, the threat we are making is that we will destroy Iran's civilian economy and inflict enormous harm on its population if they don't do what we want. But if we destroy Iran's civilian economy, then revenues from the Straits will become even more important to Iran. They will become completely critical to rebuilding after the war, which means that if we do this, we increase their incentive to maintain control of the Straits, which is exactly what we're trying to avoid.
What do you expect? Are you surprised, Gotham, that we've heard relatively little from the U.S. Congress, either party, about this war in Iran?
I'm certainly not surprised that the Republicans haven't said anything. They have continued their pattern of being completely subservient to the president. From the Democrats, part of this, I think, was the speed with which the war began, but it's been a month now, and I think they're kind of out of excuses. It's not clear to me what's happening here. This war is deeply unpopular. It is getting more unpopular with time. Other than maybe some donor pressure from some donors who are in favor of the war, if I were a Democrat who was thinking about 2026 or 2028, I'd be way ahead, way out in front on this is a disaster that needs to end. And the party is essentially at this point committing political malpractice by not committing to that.
Yeah, they're kind of absent completely here in speaking up. Speaking of speaking up, the president will be making an address at 1 p.m. today. Gotham, we know everything he said, and in fact, his address to the American public last week kind of laid out every single option available to him. What would surprise you from his comments today?
What would surprise me is a recognition that escalation is not going to get him what he wants, right? So when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So far, what they have seen is they are trying to force the Iranians to get to some better strategic outcome for the United States. And the only tool they've had, essentially, is airstrikes and making threats of even worse airstrikes. And it's just very, very clear from the strategic dynamics here, that is not going to work.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we'll see how this plays out. Again, we'll hear from the president at 1 p.m. today, Wall Street time. We'll see if there's some new news. Yeah, there's certainly going to be news. I guess we can all expect that. Gotham Wakanda lecture at the...
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the probiotic. You can get it in the powdered form or the veggie cap form. And with a good probiotic, what you're going to do is improve your gut biome. You're going to improve your mucosa layer and your immune system at the gut level, reduce leaky gut syndrome. You'll be able to sleep better. When you sleep properly, you're going to be able to consolidate memory. You're going to be able to detoxify your central nervous system, and you'll be well rested. With a good gut biome, your skin health will improve. Your metabolism will improve. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the probiotics either in the veggie cap form or in the powdered form. And with a good gut biome, your health will improve. It's the foundation. Good health starts at the gut. And since you're improving your gut and reducing leaky gut syndrome, you're reducing inflammation in the brain. Because with toxins and particles that are in the bloodstream that cause inflammation, it can lead to the blood-brain barrier to leak and therefore cause inflammation at the brain level. So a lot of people don't realize that good gut health actually improves brain function because you're reducing that inflammation at the vascular level, and therefore your blood-brain barrier is going to be improved. So good gut health is super important to slowing down the aging process. And you get all of these extra benefits. So please go to my store and get the very high quality probiotics. Make sure you use discount 5, all caps, discount 5, you get $5 off any order. You can use that as many times as you want. I want you to save some money. Get these products in your hands, use them to slow down the aging process. All right? Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right. let's listen into Al Jazeera here and what's going on. You know, as we approach 1 o'clock, it's going to. I don't understand why they keep on calling. All right, so they, what was I saying? All right, let's just go to Al Jazeera here.
Those are two other aims. Then there's sort of psychological aims, and I think reversing shame and humiliation is often a big one. And a fourth one, I would say, is a simple one of trying to stay alive. Now, if the aim is winning, then what you need to do is weaken or eliminate your enemy. But with a lot of the other aims, sometimes the enemy can be surprisingly useful. So we get this phenomenon of useful enemies, which I think is a real phenomenon. And the problem there is that people acquire, as it were, like quite a wide range of vested interests, acquire an interest sometimes in actually maintaining the enemy or taking actions that are predictably counterproductive in terms of the reproduction of the enemy. So making people angry, attacking civilians, winning, as it were, new recruits for the entity. It might be a rebel group or a terrorist group or a nation that they claim to be trying to oppose or weaken. So there's a question mark I'm trying to raise in a way about the aims in a war and whether the enemy is somebody that you want to eliminate or somebody that you might be interested at some level in continuing the existence of.
David, at this juncture in the Israeli-US war on Iran, where despite claims by both sides of a degree of military success, it's almost impossible to say who the actual winners are. But given your focus on how you frame world conflicts, I wonder whether it's possible to ask who benefits from this tension the most without potentially the need for an absolute victory.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is an interesting and complicated question. You know, one of the things that we can observe, and this is, I think, very common in wars, is that even when there hasn't really been a convincing victory by any party, you know, a number of different parties find reasons to claim that they have registered a success in the war. You know, and Trump, I think, awarded himself 15 out of 10 for his success in the war. Israel obviously would claim some security benefits. Iran can point to its ability to retaliate and so on. But I think if you can claim success, then that is kind of a political benefit in itself. Beyond that, I think that you know, the functions of war as a distraction and the functions of war as something that can quieten internal dissent and allow you to paint opponents as disloyal is something that is really quite important, you know, in the United States, in Iran, and in Israel. And I think there are elements, for example, of the Revolutionary Guards in Iran, you know, that have an interest in the continuation of sanctions, that have an interest in the continuation of international tension, pointing to common enemies, labeling dissenters as disloyal, and so on. So these things come into play, you know, and I think in terms of Israeli politics, you know, there's been a lot of trying to portray opposition as disloyal. There's been attempts to postpone accountability for corruption. There is, in a way, I think, a serial use of war, including in Gaza, which was really a genocide in my book, to distract from a process of accountability at home. I think Trump himself is very concerned with distracting people at the moment.
Yeah, let me just jump in there and break down what you've just said, because you've made it sound as if the benefits of conflict for some countries far outweigh the desire for any kind of lasting resolution as a means of controlling opposition voices or any kind of opposition within those given countries. So war is the ultimate distraction, as you say.
Well, it is the ultimate distraction. It doesn't mean that some of the threats are not real, because 9/11 was very real. Iran has made many threats against Israel, and so on. We have the horrific Hamas attacks on Israel and so on. So these things are not necessarily invented, and often they're all too real and all too horrible. But nevertheless, if we look at the pattern of responding to some of these events, I think it does predictably create new enemies. It does predictably enrage people. And so we have to look beyond the declared aim of weakening the enemy at the other possible functions, psychological, economic, and political, of taking these, what in my book are predictably counterproductive actions that are going to exacerbate conflict, that are going to perpetuate the war on terror, probably entrenching the Revolutionary Guards in Iran, though of course we don't know. We have to keep an open mind about these things.
Just picking up, David, on something else you said, because I'd like to know how this narrative of, I guess, a kind of continuous existential threat allows countries to bypass demands within their own country. So let's say demands for economic reform, human rights, desire for an increase in public spending. Because in the first 100 hours of this conflict, the US burned through $800 million per day. I mean, that's significantly higher than the opening of the Iraq or Afghanistan wars. I mean, that's money that could have been spent on housing, on education, on healthcare in the United States, but it's been funneled into the war coffers.
Yeah, and I actually thought, during Trump's first administration, the one sort of good thing about him was that he seemed to be relatively reluctant to launch international wars, and he had a whole critique of the neoconservatives and the way that, a lot of the elements of the war on terror, the waste of money, the waste of lives, and so on, that involved. And that to me was one really relatively convincing part of his campaign, but he now seems to have radically departed from that. And of course, Trump loves freedom. I mean, he loves his own freedom and the ability to change his mind, to set the agenda. And he has taken the United States in a radically different direction. I also think Israel has kind of adopted some increasingly drastic remedies to trying to solve the problem of its own security, as we saw in Gaza. So these things can kind of radicalize. And actually, I think if you create enough enemies, or you contribute to the existence of enough enemies, that in itself can encourage some very drastic solutions because of the fear of retaliation.
Yeah, talking about drastic solutions, this is what the US Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, said when he was questioned about the eye-watering costs of waging this war. He said, quote, "It costs a lot of money to kill bad guys. It costs a lot of money to kill bad guys." I mean, ironically, the Iranians have shown that they can fight an asymmetric war at a fraction of the cost. That must be a rude awakening for the Trump administration.
Yeah, I think the Iranian regime has been quite clever in promoting influence in places like Syria, in Lebanon, and so on, at a fairly low cost. And a lot of it is encouraging militia strategies and recruiting people who are often quite impoverished at relatively low cost, providing training, which is relatively cheap, and so on. As far as the United States government is concerned, I think this division of people into good guys and bad guys is incredibly simplistic. And it goes back at least as far as the Vietnam War, And the idea there, as you know, was if we can just kill enough bad guys, kill enough Viet Cong, then this is going to solve the problem of Vietnam. But, we know that the mass bombing of Vietnam created a huge number of additional recruits to the Viet Cong. So those tactics don't work, and you have to think.
Well, the thing is that he needs to take a page out of history and understand that the South Vietnamese was half-hearted in actually fighting in the war. And the United States picked the wrong side. We probably should have picked the North Korean side, or I'm sorry, not the Korean, North Vietnamese side, because the South Vietnamese didn't want to fight. And if we aligned with the North Vietnamese, we would have stopped the coupling between the North Vietnamese and the Chinese. Because at this time, China wasn't that strong. But we were worried, and this was negotiations where we would align with China and have some sort of wedge between China and Russia. And so this was some geopolitical play to go against Russia. But the South Vietnamese did not want to really fight in the war. They wanted country unification because of the fracturing from the French. The United States picked the wrong side. The dynamics of Vietnam were totally different. Now, there are some similarities. I agree with that. But the thing is that there's a major dynamic here that was different. The South Vietnamese was half-hearted in their war effort.
It was ability to get around them. And of course, the sort of the diverse nature of superpowers at the moment with Russia and China and so on, you have plenty of options. And you can go outside the dollar-based system. This is part of the reason why so many people want gold at the moment.
Let me try and
these sanctions.
Let me try and distill this then, because
this is written in the Paper Soldier book that was, I think, published in 2023. I read it 2 years ago, a year ago, 2 years ago. Very good. But the thing is that the United States has overplayed their hegemonic power, especially in the interbank commerce and the ability to sanction countries and cut them off of the global trade. And so it produced the desire for trade blocs to amalgamate, like the BRICS. But the thing is that as the United States starts exercising their hegemonic power in some of these regions, that what happens is that they start to these regional economic unions start to break apart. India at times aligns with the BRICS, at times it doesn't. Russia has been actually moving away from the BRICS, not towards the BRICS. So, and then China, they want to circumvent the United States, and they're still in the whole BRICS system. But to say the BRICS are gaining momentum or usage in the international world, that's just false. It's not. Now, that doesn't mean that everything's all lily white in terms of the petrodollar. It's not. And I do think that the United States has overplayed their sanction game and using the dollar as a weapon. Now, certain countries are aligning with them to a gold-based system. They have more gold. Now, that does move them away from the petrodollar. That's true. But if you take a look at a 10-year average, the United States dollar is very strong. It's not weak. So these people are saying, oh, the dollar's weakening. And no, it's not. Well, what it's off of its all-time highs, so you have to remember the COVID years, everyone was moving into the dollar, not into the BRICS. And that was during heavy sanctions on many countries, such as Iran. All right. So, the dollar is mean reverting to a historical average. The dollar is very strong still.
We had ISIS, which grew to a large extent out of Al-Qaeda in Iraq. So you have this sort of serial declaration of victories, and then people can relax for a little bit. But then something else happens. And a lot of times these threats are feeding into each other. There's a continuity between these organizations. I think, the destruction of Gaza, that is in a way a very distinct problem, but it was an action that was presented by Israel within the framework of a war on terror. In Sri Lanka, where I was in 2009, the government wreaked horrible destruction on the Tamil population in the name of an international war on terror. And it was actually difficult for Britain or the United States to criticize that. When they themselves were detaining people indefinitely, they themselves had the language of the war on terror, and we need to be ruthless. We need to suspend liberty to a certain extent in the interest of security.
Specifically on the language used around the war on terror, I guess a very seismic symbolic shift at least came with the rebranding of the Secretary of Defense to the Secretary of War, the Defense Department to the War Department, because that signals almost a kind of move away from more of a reactive war on terror to a US administration that sought to project power, to pursue a peace through strength, I think is the words used by Pete Hegseth. So
what's wrong with that? What is wrong with using your hegemonic power? See, the problem that we've had in previous administrations is we've been pacifists. The problem with, quote, modern philosophy, a postmodernism philosophy, is anything goes. It's all relative. No. There is nothing wrong with the United States using its hegemonic power, but it has to use it judiciously. It has to be mindful of its usage and not to overplay it and not to have hubris, but to have the mindset of Department of War versus Department of Defense. I think that's what we need, because we've been playing patty cake for too long. And what has happened is that the world has changed over the decades. And guess what? The world is being tested. Are we going to have a Western culture in the United States and in Europe? Or are we going to have a Middle Eastern culture in the United States and Europe? Which one is it going to be?
Dangerous and incredibly destructive. So I do think there's a shamelessness about what's going on, and that thing you mentioned about relabeling as a Department of War. Trump would say, well, this is honesty. He projects this image of honesty. I'm not a hypocrite. The liberals are hypocrites. I tell you the truth as it is. And he's made some considerable political capital out of that, in my opinion. But it's also a very frightening turn.
David, talking about political capital, we've talked about the big powers. I'd like to talk about the small powers, if I may, because I wonder if the rise of non-state actors, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, whether they fit into this frame as well. Because I want to know if they are motivated by the same impulses that perhaps Iran or the United States may be for their own ends. How does your approach to this work when war is being waged by smaller paramilitary networks? Okay, some see Hezbollah as being almost a kind of mini franchise of Iran in the same way that you would view the branch of a bank internationally. But is that a wrong way of looking at this?
Well, I think a lot of these non-state actors, they do very often have state backers, and we've seen it with Hezbollah, we've seen it with the Rapid Support Forces and the UAE in Sudan. So we can't sort of regard them simply as non-state actors. I think that, in the case of Hezbollah in Lebanon, there has been quite a strong effort from the Lebanese government to weaken Hezbollah. And that's something that can potentially, I think, bear a lot of fruit. And then when Israel comes in and starts bombing Lebanon and displacing, as I understand it, 1 million people, this can easily set things back. So the states tend to sort of weigh in on these struggles, these local struggles, often in extremely counterproductive ways. I think Sudan, is an interesting case of a government that, going back to the 1980s.
Breaking news. I'm going to be using it this much in my second term, but it's my honor, and they're the greatest people on earth. Our warriors are the greatest fighters on earth, and they very much appreciate you and love you, and that's why they do it. So this is all about today. I must tell you, I came out and I expected we were going to be talking about farmers, and we love our farmers. We were going to talk about so many different products, but you know what they want to talk about? Sir, this is about eggs. Eggs. Because we have the egg farmers of the entire country here, and they are unbelievable. And if you remember, when I first got elected, my first news conference with the fake news, a lot of fake news here today, but I had a news conference, and the first question, what are you going to do about eggs, sir? I said, what's wrong with eggs? I just got this. My second day in office, I had a news conference, and they were screaming at me, what am I going to do about eggs? And I said, well, it's like, tell me what's wrong with eggs. The price was so high. It was 4 times higher than it was a year before. I said, well, that sounds like a problem. Let me think about it. And Brooke Rollins, our great Secretary of Agriculture, she got involved. We all got involved. They didn't want me, as you know, just last year, it's hard to believe, they didn't want me to order eggs for the Easter egg roll, the Easter egg hunt that we have here every year. They wanted me to use plastic. I said, I'm not using plastic. We'll get it solved. And within a short period of time, eggs came down. They came down 40%, 50%. And by the time we got there, we had so many eggs, we didn't know what to do with them. And today we have more than 40,000 eggs supplied by all of the great egg farmers that are with us. So eggs is a big thing, and it was a big thing to our great First Lady, who's here someplace. Let's see. I think this is our First Lady. What do you think of our First Lady? She's a movie star. I don't know. Do we call her First Lady or a movie star? She has the biggest movie. Can you believe this? And she deserves it. Would you like to say a couple of words to your friends?
Happy Easter Monday. I hope you enjoy this beautiful day. We are celebrating a very special Easter egg roll this year because it's 250th birthday of this beautiful nation. Enjoy it, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thanks. Thank you. And she worked very hard with her staff and the staff of the White House on really just.
Eric, I'll give you the mic just in a few minutes here. Please wait.
Gets better every time, right? Gets better every time. You notice the fencing is all brand new. I said, we could have bought used fencing and saved a lot of money. They said, this is for Easter, and this is for our egg farmers, and we're going to get new fencing. Everything's new and everything's beautiful, and the White House never looked better, and our country never looked better. So I just want to thank everybody. It's been a special period of time. 1 year ago, a little bit more, our country was dead. We had a dead country. We had an administration that didn't know what the hell they were doing. Today, we have the hottest country anywhere in the world. We're respected by everybody, and that's the way we're going to keep it. That's the way we're going to keep it. So again, I want to thank all of the associations and the egg farmers and all of the people that are here. We think we could have 50,000 people coming all day long. It's open, and they expect between 30 and 50,000 people, so that's great. And most importantly, I want to just say Happy Easter and God bless America. We have the greatest country on earth. God bless you all. You're very.
Hello. You're live. Eric, are you there? Can't hear you.
Okay, I was muted.
Oh, okay. Yeah, thanks for.
Was his speech live from today? Because I know he spoke today, or was this from yesterday? He was speaking about Easter.
My understanding is that was from Al Jazeera. I thought it was live, but maybe it was yesterday. They stopped their broadcast and then went right to the White House, so I'm not sure. So okay, I thought it was a live.
On the calendar says President Trump is speaking today. It's 10 a.m. though.
Right. No, he's definitely going to be talking at 1 o'clock. He's definitely going to be talking at 1 o'clock, and that's probably going to move markets big time. But he's also right now he's taking questions. He's taking questions from the audience, the reporters right now on Bloomberg as we're speaking. So this is live. What he just said was live.
Oh, okay. So you're speaking of Easter, but that's still Easter week, I guess.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that because of everything that was going on with the search and rescue, I think they postponed what was going to happen at the White House on Sunday.
Okay. Well, sounds good. Thanks for keeping me updated. Yeah, I just wanted to join the live. I saw that something was going on with your channel, and then I guess it's just us right now, huh?
Right. Well, I have a lot of different modalities for broadcasting. People can watch on Rumble or YouTube on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and then on X Spaces. X Spaces is used for people that want to call in or just want to listen in if they're at work or whatever. So I have a lot of different ways for people. So we have more people that are tied to us listening. It's just not in X Spaces.
Okay. What's your Rumble channel?
My Rumble channel, well, that Rumble channel, the links are on my pinned. You should be able to get to my pin on X and take a look at all the different channels that I have. I have YouTube, Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. I have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 6 YouTube channels. There's a lot of different channels that this thing's streaming on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so all you have to do is just click one of my videos and you get all the links to all the different.
All right.
And I have like 2 different X channels. I have GETTR, I have TikTok, Substack, a lot of different ways to consume my content. But I greatly appreciate you asking for the mic. But whenever you want to ask a question or whatever, just ask for the mic and just you're live on the show.
All right, thanks, Dr. Paul. Good talking to you.
Yep.
We'll stay in touch. Yep. I'll be around. I gotta run out too and do some work around the house here.
All right. You have a good day. Bye bye.
Thanks, you too. Bye.
Okay, so what we're doing here right now for the market is the S&P 500 is trading at 6,595. So we're below that 6,600's resistance level. So it's really important that we get above 6,600 today for equities to try to march upward. And oil is trading at $112 a barrel. Natural gas is trading at 2.829. Markets are walking, quote, on eggshells because we don't know what Trump's going to say at 1 p.m. It's going to be big news, so we're just going to have to wait it out. So let's listen into Al Jazeera talking about the economic blow to Tehran.
energy sites across the region, including Qatar's Ras Laffan facility. Well, South Pars forms part of a 9,700 square kilometer gas field, the largest on Earth, jointly held by Iran and Qatar. For Iran, South Pars is the backbone of its energy supply, meeting around 80% of the country's domestic natural gas demand. Stretching beneath the Gulf, the field is divided. Roughly 1/3 lies within Iran's territory as South Pars, while the larger share extends into Qatari waters, known as the North Dome Field. Well, we are live in Dubai, Ramallah in the occupied West Bank, the White House and Tehran. Let's begin with Ali Hashem in the Iranian capital. Good to see you, Ali. So Iran, we understand, responding to Pakistan's ceasefire initiative. What more do we know?
Well, Iran responded to the 15 points initiative that was, or at least 15 points that President Trump sent. The Iranians seem to have refused parts of this plan. Mainly, they responded with calling for peace to be across the region. They do not want a ceasefire. They have issues. They are having reservations. They're putting reservations on the idea of ceasefire. So they want a peace plan for the whole region. That means all regional conflicts that are already going on right now. They want them to be part of this solution. Second thing, that they want a protocol for safe passage in the Strait of Hormuz. This is what they are offering. Also, clearly, they're saying that based on previous experiences with the United States, they cannot accept a ceasefire. That's why they want something comprehensive and completely different. This is what the Iranians are putting now on the table. How, with the other side, how President Trump is going to deal with this is going to be the big question.
All right, Ali, back with you in a second. Let's now speak to our White House correspondent, Kimberly Hackett, look at this in more detail with you, Kimberly. So, confirmation the Iranians are engaging in diplomatic efforts with terms of their own. We talked previously about dual-track diplomacy coming from the US, so issuing threats while apparently engaging in talks. Can you shed some light on where we are right now when it comes to the US stance?
Well, it still is a dual track. What we know is that the vice president, along with Middle East envoys Witkoff and Kushner, and also the Secretary of State, but for the most part, the vice president has been leading these discussions and these back channel discussions with intermediaries. But the bottom line is that there has been no signature from the U.S. president on any deal that would lead to a 45-day ceasefire, because as you point out, the U.S.
As this news is breaking, with Trump saying Iran's proposal is significant but not good enough, oil is starting to go up. Now we're trading at $112 a barrel, and the ETF UCO, which is the 3 times leveraged ETF for longing oil futures, is now trading at 40.53. Also, natural gas is ticking upward. It's now at 2.833.
With these threats and that looming deadline of Tuesday, 8 p.m. at Washington time, for there to be some sort of agreement that would not only halt hostilities, but also reopen the Strait of Hormuz. In fact, the U.S. president continuing that maximum pressure in order to get Iran to comply, saying he will, quote, blow up the whole country if a deal's not reached. Now, the U.S. president is expected to have a 17 GMT press conference today where he'll be talking about the rescue of the second airman from that F-15E, a story that Al Jazeera English broke on Saturday evening. We're going to hear from the president and hopefully also get some clarity on where things stand, not only on the discussions, but also on whether or not he really is firm about this deadline, given the fact that the U.S. president has issued deadlines to reopen the strait before, only to extend them.
Thanks, Kimberly. Back with Ali Hashem in Tehran. Ali, so as Kimberly was saying there, dual track diplomacy is happening right now, so the threat of violence coupled with the potential for talks, we have seen the threat of violence become a reality in Iran in the past 24 hours, particularly when it comes to the targeting of the South Pars facility by Israeli forces. What more are you learning on that?
Well, the attack on South Pars comes as the attacks on other infrastructure is going on. We saw attacks on universities on South Pars, which is actually a strategic field for the Iranians, and given the precedents, this is going to trigger a retaliation that is going to overcomplicate the whole situation. We've seen attacks on pharmaceutical factories. We've seen attacks on chemical factories. We've seen attacks on universities today. The University of Sharif, that's described by the Iranian foreign minister as the MIT of Iran yesterday. University of Ph.D. day before on Al-Musana'at and others and others and others. So what we are seeing currently is a kind of a deliberate attacking of the infrastructure, science infrastructure.
And because they're attacking the petrochemical industry in Iran, the bridges, the polytechnic universities, it seems to me that we are knocking out infrastructure for a ground invasion. And Trump has already made the decision to do the ground invasion. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the magnesium and zinc. This will help to boost up your immune system and help with brain function. Super important, like I've been saying throughout this broadcast. Vitamin C and magnesium helps with your skin health, also boosts up your immune system and helps with brain function. Super important. Stack them together for the max benefit, magnesium and zinc, and vitamin C and magnesium. A lot of people don't realize you're probably deficient in magnesium in terms of slowing down the aging process, all right? A lot of people will look at, well, maybe they're not deficient in certain vitamins based on the FDA, recommendation. That's not the point. The point is, are you deficient on vitamins not based on the recommendation of the FDA? Are you deficient on vitamins in terms of slowing down the aging process? And most people are. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the magnesium, boost up that brain health. It's super important. Most people are not consuming enough magnesium in their diet to be able to slow down the aging process of the brain and to provide neuroprotection. Use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
That are targeted are not cleared for publication, or that clearance is delayed. Like recently in Rishon LeZion, a building was heavily damaged. There was a crater in the road next to it, and almost 24 hours later, the military censor cleared for publication that was in fact a drone factory. So for now, what we know is that there is damage all across Israeli territory. A lot of it is focused on the center, and that's because most Israelis live in that area, but also importantly, there are very strategic military assets there, military bases.
For the ones that are watching the telemetry of the market, you can see that the future CL, which is the futures for oil, WTI, it's ticking up. It's trading at 112.38, and the UCO is now at 40.51. So as we're approaching that 1 o'clock mark with Trump and with this news with Iran, and it's not this peace agreement is not good enough, it's looking like that we're going to hit Iran some more, and the futures price is moving upward.
Related to Israel's capacity to intercept, but also the kinds of missiles that are being used by Iran.
Nora de Ramah, thank you. was going to say, Mr. Ravi, he's live in Dubai monitoring developments across the GCC region. And Zain, I mean, last time we had an attack on South Pars. Actually, Zain, we're going to pause this conversation and go straight to Donald Trump.
The one, they are both recovering very well. They were both injured and they're doing well. What else?
I'm going to have to, because of the background noise while they're interviewing Trump, it's the recording, the way I do the recording here, you're probably not going to be able to hear it very well. So with that, let's just move towards another video here. This was the BBC 34 minutes ago.
He has repeated now to target Iranian energy and transport infrastructure if Tehran doesn't open the Strait of Hormuz. This is what Donald Trump posted on Truth Social, and we have blanked out a swear word. He said Tuesday will be Power Plant Day and Bridge Day all wrapped up in one. In Iran, there will be nothing like it. Open the, and this is where President Trump uses an expletive, straight, you crazy bastards, or you'll be living in hell. Just watch. Praise be to Allah. Well, on a lengthy post in X, former Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, she was a prominent figure associated with the MAGA movement, is just one of the people to respond. She wrote, everyone in his administration that claims to be a Christian needs to fall on their knees and beg forgiveness from God. I know all of you and him, and he has gone insane. All of you are complicit. Trump threatened to bomb power plants.
First of all, MTG. Here's a classic example that proves Nietzsche's point. Nietzsche, the philosopher, if you want a little bit of background on different philosophies between Machiavelli all the way to Nietzsche, get this book. It's really good. It was published this year, I think it was. Let's see. I think it was this year. Harvard professor wrote this. It's basically a lit review of some of the works of different philosophers. And the last chapter is Nietzsche. I'm almost done with the book here. It was published last year by the president and fellows of Harvard College. But it's Harvey Mansfield. He's a research professor of government at Harvard University. So this is about philosophy, but it was more about political philosophy. Now, in Nietzsche, now why is this important? MTG, all right? She's saying, you Christians, you need to get on your knees and repent, and because Trump is a warmonger. Well, Nietzsche was saying that the problem with the Christian religion is that they have too much empathy, and because of that, it ends up people take advantage of them. Now, he had different moralities. He had the master morality, the slave morality, and the priest morality. All right. And in terms of the slavery morality, he was talking about how Christians and the Christian faith has a tendency to turn the other cheek and not to be more forceful against your enemy when you need to be. Now, that wasn't the case for all of Christianity, because obviously you had the Crusades. But the point here is that modern Christianity has a tendency to be a pacifist. And when you're a pacifist, you get taken advantage of. And this whole Christian nationalism is leading to, in the United States, a America First pacifist perspective versus America First use its hegemonic power perspective. You can be America First and still be engaging in the world on the international stage and deal with domestic policies. It's not either or. It's not mutually exclusive. You got to walk and chew gum at the same time. You got to be doing domestic and international policy. America First only wants you to focus on domestic policy. The America First version that MTG subscribes to. Now, there is the Pompeo version of America First, where it is leveraging the hegemonic power on the international stage. But MTG doesn't subscribe to that. So the bottom line is this. She is using Christianity as a means to, like, well, you need to be a pacifist. Well, if you're a pacifist, isn't that what the caliphate wants? Isn't that what the whole idea of open borders, and if you just turn the other cheek and just let people in, then what you have is suicidal empathy. This was, Nietzsche warned society about this, that your society will weaken if you subscribe to what MTG is subscribing to. Machiavelli also warned that there are times that to do good, you have to be forceful. Well, MTG thinks that everything is going to be copacetic. Let me give you an example why MTG is wrong. If we don't knock out Iran's theocratic regime, if they continue on the path of weapons of mass destruction, they will use them against regional players, against Europe, or even against the United States. When do you get engaged with this? When? When a missile is launched, and that's when you consider it an imminent threat? When they reach from 60% enrichment to 90% enrichment? Is that when it's an imminent threat? At what point do you consider an imminent threat? And unfortunately, with MTG's slavery morality, based on the lens of Nietzsche, if you fight your enemy because it's an imminent threat, it's too late. And then we lose our hegemonic power. She's dangerous because of slavery morality.
Bridges hurts the Iranian people, the very people that Trump claims that he was freeing. We've seen some trolling of the president as well from Iranian embassies around the world. Reacting to that post, have a look at what some of them have been saying. This is the embassy in South Africa, who said, seriously, think about the 25th Amendment, Section 4. That's a reference to the constitutional provision which allows for the vice president and the majority of cabinet to declare the president unfit for office.
So if you fight the enemy, you call them bad names. If you swear, you must be insane. No, he's talking military. He's not swearing. He's just talking military. Have you ever been around people behind the scenes that are in the military?
He in charge. The Iranian embassy in Austria said POTUS has stooped to an unprecedented level of begging, laced with bitter, hollow rudeness and threats. The desperation is almost palpable, dripping from every syllable. Take it easy, Tiger, keep your cool, wrote the Iran embassy in Bulgaria. And in the UK, the Iranian embassy quoting the proverb, it is better to keep your mouth closed and let people think you're a fool than to open it and remove all doubt. And finally, in India.
Well, I wonder what they're going to say when we actually blow up their infrastructure and actually have ground forces. You know, the reality of the situation is that the United States needs to knock out Iran's theocratic regime because they're out of control and crazy. You think Trump is crazy? Just listen to the Ayatollah for the last 47 years and what they wanted to do to the United States and Israel. And not only that, to Sunni Islam, because the Ayatollah is Shia Islam. The Ayatollah is crazy. They literally believe that it's their right to set the world on fire. Now the question is, what does setting on fire mean? Is it nuclear? I have a tendency to think that it's actually a fever, and that when everybody gets a fever, that means that a pathogen was spread. And biological warfare has extremely low barriers of entry. So the point here is that we have to solve the problem. We can't keep on kicking the can down the road. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the structural nano silver soaps. You can get it in lemongrass and also in peppermint. I have those two in stock right now. Get a few bars for your household. These are very good for your skin and for the pores of your skin. Use it every day. It also helps to neutralize. That's super important, especially during the cold season. So please go to my store. Make sure you stock up on the structural nano silver soaps. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. Get a few products. Use these products every day and you're going to actually improve your health and wellness. Let's continue on how bad Trump must be.
Swearing and throwing insults, how sore loser brats behave. Get a grip on yourself, old man. Let's speak to Liz Goodwin, Congress reporter at Washington Post. Liz, I'm not sure if you heard all of those bits of trolling from Iranian embassies right around the world, and I did bring our viewers that one comment that we've had from Marjorie Taylor Greene. But give us a more broader sense of what reaction there's been to that Truth Social post.
A lot of the reaction you're seeing among Republican lawmakers is still happening in private. There's a feeling that, contradicting the president during wartime is not a good look. A lot of Republican lawmakers and Democratic lawmakers really don't like Iran, don't want to be seen as defending Iran even in this moment. But I think the questions around Trump's strategy, the way he's handling this conflict, especially as gas prices continue to rise, are peeking out to the surface more from, Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's now out of Congress. She's free to say these things openly. But you're seeing some more lawmakers question this. So we had Senator John Curtis say earlier this week that he thinks Congress would need to vote to authorize this war if it keeps dragging on. Initially, Trump said this would be a matter of weeks, 4 weeks maybe. Now, we're well past that date. And then you also have another moderate Congressman, Mike Lawler, who was saying that he also believes Congress needs to take back some of its authority now, even though he's not criticizing directly the actual war at this point.
Liz, did the president get a bit of a bump, though, after the successful rescue of these airmen who were downed in Iran?
I think the rescue of these airmen is sort of a unifying moment in the war, one of the few ones, just because, everyone is relieved and happy that that person was rescued, did not become hostage that could further, make this situation even more volatile. And I think people were a little baffled that the president sort of stepped on that moment with this message that you read, which was so sort of profane. It sounded very, maybe even a little bit like desperate, a little bit unbecoming of the way a president should sound. And I think people are confused why he did that during that moment.
What's happening with gas prices, Liz, and how is that affecting how people feel about the conflict?
So gas prices have topped nationally $4 a gallon. They've gone up nearly 40% since the conflict started. Diesel, which a lot of big trucks use, has gone up even more, almost 50% since the conflict started. So that's a real difference that people are feeling in their wallets already. And then obviously the fear is that could extend to other goods like food and, basic necessities if this keeps dragging on. And I think that's why you're seeing that this war is not super popular here in the U.S., even though it's in its beginning weeks. Usually there's a big bump, there's a rally around the flag effect, and that just has never happened with this conflict. And in fact, every week it seems to lose people, especially independents and Democrats who are very strongly against it at this moment.
And what are we expecting from President Trump today? There are reports that he's going to give a briefing to the press, but is that just going to be on the successful rescue of these airmen?
Well, a nice thing for reporters about President Trump is a press briefing never really stays on one topic. So I think the point of the briefing is to focus on this rescue with Secretary Hegseth by his side, but I assume he will address other questions and kind of veer into other topics as he goes.
Liz, Good to have you with us as always. Thank you so much, Liz Goodwin, joining us there from the Washington Post. Let's bring you right up to date with what is happening in the Middle East with these new reports that we're getting of some explosions that are hitting Iran's largest gas complex. And we are also getting comment from Israel's Defense Minister, Israel Katz, saying the IDF has been given the go-ahead to hit infrastructure in Iran. We can take you to Daniel DeSimone, who is in Jerusalem for us. Daniel, firstly, what have we been hearing from Israel Katz?
So within the last hour, Israel Katz, who's Israel's defense minister, has announced, has made a statement saying the IDF is strongly attacking, has strongly attacked the largest petrochemical facility in Iran, which is located in the southwest of Iran. That's a region that's really seen as the heartland of the petrochemical industry in Iran. He is saying in his statement that the key is a key target responsible for about 50% of the country's petrochemical production after a second key facility was attacked last week. In his statement, he said that he and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu have given the go-ahead for further attacks on Iranian infrastructure. He says that this is, he said, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and I have instructed the Israel Defense Forces to continue to attack with all force the national infrastructure of the Iranian regime. This focus on infrastructure is also consistent with what we've been hearing from Donald Trump, President Trump, with his threats to attack infrastructure. He's talking about attacking electricity infrastructure, civil infrastructure. Last week, Benjamin Netanyahu spoke about also attacks on steel-making production in Iran. And the way that Israel is framing this, they're saying that the petrochemical industry and the steel-making industry are a money-making machine for Tehran. They say they're part of the machine that builds weapons, that's used to build weapons, missiles that strike Israel. Reports about these attacks on petrochemical facilities in Iran also being made in Iran. We're seeing that in Iranian media as well.
And Daniel, what is the very latest from Haifa with that search operation still underway, that building that's been hit there?
Well, there was a strike in Iran, in Haifa overnight, an apartment building in Haifa. Overnight, search teams looking through the rubble. There were 4 missing people. Initially, they found 2 people who were found to be dead. Later, they recovered 2 further bodies. They're described as a couple in their 80s, a man in his 40s and a woman in her 30s. There are reports that all of those people were killed in a stairwell where they were taking shelter. Throughout Israel, there are daily missile alerts. When there are alerts, people are encouraged to seek shelter. There are bomb shelters, and people in residential complexes often seek shelter in areas of their property which they think are safer. Last night, various missile alerts throughout Israel. This morning, also a missile struck in Tel Aviv. There was a missile alert here last night in Jerusalem as well.
Daniel, thank you so much for joining us with that update from Jerusalem.
We're going to move over towards Al Jazeera here. They're talking to, I believe, a professor.
Very disappointing. That's a subplot for all of this.
Yeah.
But right now, President
important guardrail that doesn't appear to be there.
It just doesn't appear to be there. And President Trump just said that we can't afford to have nuclear weapons in the hands of a lunatic. People can judge how extensive that statement is, but certainly there's no check and balance right now in U.S. foreign policy.
Okay. Many thanks to both of you, Paul Musgrave, Georgetown University here in Qatar, and Zedin Al-Kanani, and Director of Arab Perspectives Institute. Pleasure. Now let's return to Israel's attack on Iran's largest petrochemical complex in the port city of Asaluya. Zain Basravi is live in Dubai. We were interrupted, Zain, by US President speaking outside the White House earlier. The GCC, I think it's fair to say, is something of a pressure cooker right now, given that previously we saw Iran retaliate when its South Pars facility was hit. And of course, it was Ras Laffan here in Qatar that was targeted. What kind of calculations do you imagine or are already being expressed by GCC states at this really critical moment?
Well, they're not holding the calculator, are they? So whatever calculations they're making are reacting effectively to what U.S. and Israel are doing on one side and how Iran is retaliating on the other side. And that's really been the case since day one of this war, since before the war started. The GCC countries, in one voice, tried to keep this conflict from beginning. It was of no benefit to them, even with long-standing rivalries between the Arab world and Iran. There was a thaw for so long, and there had been a building of bridges. All of that political collateral squandered with the beginning of this war and Iran's retaliation on U.S. assets, U.S. bases, U.S. interests in the GCC. Now, there have been a number of attacks throughout the course of today. There have been a number of attacks throughout the course of the last 24 hours, the last 38, 40 days. But I want to focus in on Ras Laffan, of course. Why does it matter today? Why does this specific location matter, and how does it reflect the wider issue of infrastructure in the region? Let's look at what happened. March 2nd, 2 Iranian drones were set to fire on Ras Laffan Industrial City. At the time, there was no damage, but a power plant in Massaid was also one of the targets. Now, at the time, there were some reports that Iran denied the attack, but Qatar continued to say that the trajectory of the attacks would have said otherwise. But that was a shot across the bow. And it was made clear at the time that liquid natural gas, the very lifeblood, the core of how Qatar earns its money, fuels its economy, how the country exists. That was a red line. It was an existential threat. And power plants also, existential threat, red line. Now, Israel carried out an attack on Iran's South Pars gas field on March 18th. On the night of the 18th and into the morning of the 19th of March, we saw Ras Laffan get there. We saw the industrial facilities there, the power plants around there, multiple strikes, and effectively brought the Ras Laffan liquid natural gas facility, one of the largest liquid natural gas providers in the world. 20% of the world's supply comes from Qatar, and is a massive part of European energy security and energy security in countries like South Korea. All of it coming to a close. The system went offline. Companies like Qatar Energy show having to declare force majeure to buyers of Qatari liquid natural gas. We're also hearing the headlines today really show the ramifications of that. Qatari LNG tankers being attempting to cross the Strait of Hormuz had to turn back. So what this attack has done is effectively bring the capacity of Qatar to generate liquid natural gas to a close. And if there is more retaliation, then that brings the threat of more attacks like this directly to the doorstep of GCC countries once again. So this is really a microcosm of what could happen.
Understood. Saying many thanks, Mr. Ravi in Dubai. Now, the International Atomic Energy Agency has issued a statement on recent attacks near Iran's Bushehr nuclear power plant. In a social media post, the nuclear watchdog has confirmed recent impacts of military strikes near Iran's Bushehr nuclear power plant, including one just 75 meters from the site perimeter. The plant itself hasn't been damaged. It warns that continued military activity near the plant that's operating with large amounts of nuclear fuel could cause a severe radiological accident with harmful consequences for people and the environment in Iran and beyond. Off in London, we're joined by Elizabeth Poor. She's a senior fellow with the Atlantic Council's Transatlantic Security Initiative. Good to see you, Elizabeth. So Iran has criticized the IAEA response after the attack on Bushehr, saying inaction by the UN nuclear watchdog, quote, emboldens aggression against nuclear facilities such as this particular power plant. Do they have a point, Elizabeth?
So, in a sense, they have a point, but in this conflict, really, the rules-based international order are being dismissed left and right, and that is the problem. It has taken the world decades to build up these rules, and the rules they benefit everybody in good times and bad. And when they are being ignored or not fully adhered to, then everybody suffers the consequences. And this is the problem. Iran has not been, let's say, a full-throated adherent to international rules, and now it's experiencing others perhaps being not completely full-throated adherents as well. And there is no, I think your viewers will need no reminder, there is no global police that can enforce these rules. The United Nations was never a global police, and now it's more weakened than it has been in any other decade or any other time in its history. So everybody is suffering the consequences from the deterioration of this system, which may in fact deteriorate further, and that is a problem for all of us.
The IAEA confirmed today that the strike, or the most recent strike, landed just 75 meters on Bichet's perimeter. How do you read this? Is this a case of surgical precision meant to intimidate? Because this is particularly high stakes, isn't it? I mean, some would even argue reckless.
It is an incredibly frightening situation. And we should remember that it wouldn't just be Iran that would be harmed if there were to be a direct strike. So I think future historians and possibly journalists will be able to figure out whether this strike was intended as intimidation, whether it was reckless targeting, or perhaps unfortunate targeting, or targeting gone wrong. But it is incredibly dangerous that we are talking about the strikes that have happened so close to facilities that, if they were to be hit directly, could unleash a danger on all of us, or at least on the very large part of the region. And we should remember there has been similar situations in the war in Ukraine, where Russia has struck Ukrainian facilities, not nuclear, well, actually civilian nuclear facilities, and there has been some damage, and only the good fortune of Ukraine has, I think, saved Ukraine and the rest of Europe from a very significant nuclear accident there. So we are talking about extremely serious potential harm, not just to the immediate vicinity, but to the wide region as well.
You've underlined the catastrophic consequences of what might happen if this goes wrong. I'm just still struggling to fathom why this is being done at all. Is Bichet now being used as some sort of radiological ransom by both sides of this conflict? Is the US and Israel using it to try and reopen the Strait of Hormuz, while Iran uses it to deter essentially a full-scale invasion by reminding the world of what could happen should there be any kind of fallout risk to the GCC?
I think you're right, and the fundamental problem is that the JCPOA was, so the Iran nuclear deal was abandoned first by the first Trump administration, and then after the first Trump administration had abandoned it, Iran stopped adhering to it as well, and then the other participants, including the European Union. If the JCPOA had still been in place, that would have been a scheme for inspections, and there have been efforts by the International Energy Agency, Atomic Agency, to inspect in recent months and years. Iran has not been particularly forthcoming in allowing access, but now that this war is taking place, clearly it's impossible for the IAEA to conduct any inspections whatsoever, and that leaves everybody worse off. There is a guilt on both sides in this war, but I think the bottom line that the world could and should agree on is that giving the IAEA an opportunity to inspect is the very bottom line, and that is something that was in place under the JCPOA.
Donald Trump, of course, tore up when he first became president. Elizabeth Braw, senior fellow with the Atlantic Council's Transatlantic Security Initiative. Thanks for joining us on Al Jazeera. Okay, it's now to Jonah Hull in London as we chart market reaction to the war.
Well, hello there, and welcome to Al Jazeera studio here in London, where we're assessing, as you say, the economic fallout of the Iran conflict. Asian stock markets rose slightly, while European markets are closed for the Easter holiday, but investors remain wary after those threats by the US president against Iranian infrastructure. That is key, of course, to this figure. the oil price, $109 a barrel currently, and the cost of oil, of course, directly influences one major sector in particular, and that's travel. Well, here in the UK, travellers are having to reroute their holiday plans, not just because of the rising cost of jet fuel and the way that it's beginning to push up the price of air travel, but because the UK government is also advising against all but essential travel to the Middle East. Sonia Gallego reports.
Well, it's that time of the year where families are deciding whether to go abroad for their holidays. They usually try and take the opportunity to try and get some extra sun, which you will not get here. But this year, some families are choosing to stay closer to home. Why? Well, the rising cost in energy, food, and mortgages caused by the war on Iran is also hitting holidays as well. And it's not just the flights, the hotels, even spending money abroad is costing so much more. So families are having to reconfigure what it is that they want to do this year and how to save a bit more money in a year which is already proving to be financially quite constraining.
We'd like to go away, but obviously we have not booked anything yet. And but probably if we're going to do it, it has to be over the next few days. But on the other hand, who knows, things can be resolved.
What's putting you off?
The flight is essentially not only the price, but also getting to the actual time and then being cancelled for any unexpected reason.
There's an awful lot of uncertainty there. We'd be very skeptical to do anything until we know what way things are. You know, there's just so much uncertainty.
Are you thinking about taking a holiday abroad this year?
Probably not, no.
Why not?
I think just with rising costs and uncertainty around, I think we'd probably explore more in the UK than abroad. Yeah.
Staycation it is then for you.
Staycation, yeah, it is, yeah.
As a shift, the travel industry is watching closely because the war on Iran has sent fuel prices surging and it's weakened the pound as well. There's also uncertainty about how far this crisis could go. So it seems for some that the staycation is back, not by choice, but by circumstance. Of many, the question will be not if they can take a break, but how far they literally can afford to go. Sonia Gallego, Al Jazeera, London.
With me now here on set is Kona Hack, commodities consultant and former head of research at ED&F, Man, the commodities merchant. Good to see you again, Kona. We'll talk about the travel aspect in a moment, but let's first deal with this idea of uncertainty, deep uncertainty that a lot of people feel that is multiplied day by day, particularly in the recent days with these threats and counter-threats. We stand again on the precipice between a possible deal and a possible escalation. How are the markets after this Easter break likely, do you think, to deal with it?
They're cautioned. I think they're looking at it with a little bit of apprehension. They're not quite sure whether to go up or down in terms of bullish or bearish. There's also a little bit of headline fatigue coming in because they've been here before.
I'm going to pivot over. I'm going to pivot over to CNBC right here, get their perspective.
Positions. CTAs, they may be net short positions.
No, they are, according to this. They're about 18.5 billion short.
Right. So that is potential buying firepower that has to come in. So the only question to me is, and this is a question nobody can answer, what happens? Do you go after Iran's energy infrastructure? If you do, then you'll put a floor under oil at a much higher level, and that could really turn over the apple cart. Overall, I agree, intermediate, it looks fine. Long-term looks fine. It's no secret you have 14%, 14.4% earnings growth this quarter. So that is attractive for stocks. The guidance, I don't know about the guidance. Is it going to be somewhat couched and we don't know what happens?
Probably.
Yeah, it should
probably.
But overall, productivity because of AI is increasing dramatically.
We always, not always, but you try and criticize. Oh well, they're going to never waste a crisis, so to speak, to think about how you guide. But I think post Liberation Day period and also now, given the war uncertainty, it's fully justified for CEOs on these earnings calls to say, I mean, we feel pretty good about the environment, but we just don't know if this lingers on any further. That's going to leave people maybe dissatisfied, Jimmy, with what CEOs see. But until the numbers change, like the Weiss talking about 14.5% yearly earnings growth, then the commentary doesn't really matter much.
Yeah, so talking about earnings growth, and now we're up to 16% projected year-over-year growth. The amazing thing to me is that earnings estimates for this year on the S&P 500 have increased by 3% since hostilities broke out. And some may want to say, okay, well, that's higher energy prices flowing through to energy companies. It's not. I mean, that's a part of it, but 3 times that effect is going to be felt in technology stocks. And by the way, it's going to be a good 3 weeks or so before we get technology stocks reported. So I think the real danger to this market, if there is one, is that technology stocks disappoint either in reported results or, Scott, as you're just pointing out here, in the guidance. But we've got
what are the chances of that, honestly?
Well, here's I don't
let's
think
just
it's a
not
high
state. Let's just not state it as throwing it out there in the wind. What are the real probabilities that these big tech companies are going to disappoint on their numbers or their spending plans and all that?
There's
Honestly,
2 things to consider. One, expectations are high. They've done nothing but rise over the last 3 years. The second thing is there are going to be margin pressures, particularly from the semiconductor space. We do know that there are pressures on the supply chain in semiconductors. We all know very well what's going on with memory chips and pricing there. So I don't think, let's be clear, I don't think these stocks are going to disappoint, but I don't think we can rule out that along the way there are some disappointments. Remember, by the way, last quarter, Microsoft, for instance, disappointed because they were supply constrained in building out Azure growth. So things like that can happen. But ultimately, just go back to this week. You know, it's hard to, and famous last words here, it's hard to see things getting worse. Like, do we think that the Strait of Hormuz is going to be more closed? There's about 10 ships going a day through the Strait of Hormuz. Before the hostilities, it was over 100. So, of course, Iran could bomb more energy fields, refineries, etc. But I do think that, you know, it's hard to see things getting materially worse.
it's hard to try and use technical analysis, I think, at moments like this, because in certain instances, this is different. In that, if you say, like Jonathan Krinsky does today, that the bottom's not in yet, the reality is we're lacking the fully oversold conditions that typically accompany a breach of the 200-day moving average, especially since that breach has now lasted 11 straight days. I'd say, well, of course, that can be true. We didn't have, according to those who watch, Bryn, the classic capitulation or full washout, but you also don't have, you know, the classic kind of communicator, I suppose you could say, in the Oval Office. I mean, people are afraid of being too negative. Maybe you didn't get and wouldn't get the classic washout that you would expect at times like this, because people are afraid of missing out on a post on social media, a change of direction. It's happened sometimes multiple times a day. The language has. So it's left people, I think, a little confused as to how to position, but certainly afraid to be too negative this market.
100% agree. I think the way I'm looking at the technicals from the 200-day, we don't have to have a washout. Those washouts are actually quite rare. We had it at Liberation Day. We had it during COVID. And so what I look at, I think what's been a very good guide, is we broke the 200-day, I want to say March 18th or 19th. Going back 20 plus years, if we get back above the 200-day within 30 days by April 19th, there's actually a 100% hit where the market's up a year later. If we do not get above there by April 19th, the data is not so great, because then it starts turning down. And so I just think that we still have a couple of weeks. I don't think we need a washout, but I do think investors watching the 200 days.
This is the reason why I keep on saying that the 6,600 is an important resistance level that we need to break. In addition, you have a support level at 6,450, which is the 23% retracement, and the 38% retracement is 6,140. So with that, it's really important to understand that if there is a downturn, that 6,140 is going to be tested. If that breaks, then it's 5,880 is approximately the 50% retracement, which is very strong. But as it's falling, just continue to buy equities. This is just because it's going to come back up. And because of that, you're going to have a much higher return. So, you know, I suspect that it may test the 6,450 again, but I don't think it will get down to the 6,140.
Both ways. In a highly foggy and opaque environment, I could easily make as negative a case as I could a positive case.
Yes.
Ceasefire, you get all negative, you get a ceasefire, market's going to rip. And part because the shorts, there's still a lot of shorts at the institutional side. You get a short covering rally like that. You get all, you know, bulled up, and then you get some degree of escalation. Okay, well, obviously, I can make a cogent case that the market's going to be susceptible to significant downside on that. So then just X both of those out, play the hand you got. Play the hand you got is that earnings are expected to be good. The macro environment is still pretty good. I know there are risks, and Jamie Dimon mentions them in his shareholder letter. Yet again today, some are worried about the Fed making a policy mistake. But again, cut out all that noise and just play the hand you got right now. Markets, I mean, the economy's pretty decent. The jobs report surprise to the upside. You can hit it on some of it was volatile and, you know, the revisions, et cetera. But that's what I think we're looking at.
And I think you're correct. And I think what that means to the viewers and certainly the wealth management industry, Jimmy, is that this isn't an inflection point. This isn't something that is similar to what we were experiencing in the early 2000s or around the great financial crisis. This is something where we have elevated volatility or recalibration on valuation, and therefore we have corrective price action.
Let me hold you just for 2 seconds. We're going to go to the White House. Megan Casella is there. The president is making some comments. Obviously, he's this morning, and let's listen into what Megan's reporting is. Hi there.
Scott, that's right. This is the second time now we heard from the president out on the South Lawn this morning ahead of his 1 p.m. press conference. And what he was doing here is he was knocking down the idea primarily of that 45-day ceasefire proposal that we've been talking about so far today that's being pushed by intermediaries. This is the idea that a 45-day ceasefire would take effect ahead of the president's tomorrow 8 p.m. deadline to reopen the Strait of Hormuz while a broader deal was being negotiated. What the president said just now was, quote, "The only one that's going to set a ceasefire is me," referring to himself, knocking down that idea. The proposal he had earlier called it not good enough, but a very significant step. So more to come possibly in the later press conference about how he feels and how he does want to proceed. He also was really maintaining a firm deadline on that tomorrow 8 p.m. deadline that he set. Of course, he has moved this around a few times. That's the deadline for the Iranians to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, or he says he'll be targeting things like power plants and bridges. He says that, yes, that is the final deadline this time around, and he also appeared to brush off any concerns that targeting those power plants and bridges, given that they are civilian infrastructure, would amount to a war crime. He said he wasn't worried about it, and he said instead that the only war crime is allowing Iran to have a nuclear weapon. He also gives a little bit of color on how negotiations are ongoing, or at least who is leading them. He said that the Vice President, J.D. Vance, is involved in those negotiations with the Iranians or with the intermediating countries. He also said that Steve Witkoff, the special envoy, and Jared Kushner are involved in those negotiations as well. And when he was asked whether the Vice President might be dispatched to have some in-person meetings with the Iranian counterparts, he said he could be. So more to come on that front as well, Scott.
All right, Megan, thank you. Megan Casella, head of the president's news conference, about 45 minutes or so from now.
Please go to my store at the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the structural nano silver lozenges. This one is the orange splash with the vitamin C. You can also get it in Manuka honey. You can also get the drops in blueberry, cherry flavor, and also in honey and lemon. These drops and lozenges will help to reduce throat irritation during the cold season or the allergy season. We're in the allergy season now. It behooves you to get a few bags of the drops and lozenges now. What it'll do is it'll create secretions to protect your oral pharynx and your epithelial cells in the oral pharynx and reduce that irritation, but also to neutralize if you need to neutralize something. So it's really important to have. It's made from structural nano silver, very high quality. This is way better than any other lozenges, any other of the lozenges that are out there that are not structural nano silver. Structural nano silver lozenges are by far the best to use if you have throat irritation. Super important. Go to my store, get the great supplements that I have, get the lozenges, use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
People are going to seize it. So, look, I don't really know what value is anymore. When I take a look at Cottrell, which I own, which used to be a value stock, and now it's still overvalued. So I think the waters have gotten murky, clearly. The only one that's drawing the lines towards value versus growth are the ETFs that are the value ETFs, because it's got a title to it.
Let's just say almost everything but tech.
So,
I
yes.
guess for the context of
That's
this.
fair.
For this conversation.
The outperformance of energy and materials has contributed to value surging and having this mean reversion advantage over growth. If you were to tell me as we move forward to Jimmy's point that things don't get any worse and oil prices retreat, then I'm with you, Steve, because then I think it's about the Mag 7. I think it's a rebuilding of position and technology. And I think overall, you want to be tactical. I still believe in this environment, you want to be tactical. I bought Apple at 252.5 last week. It's now approaching 260. On the close today, if it is sitting here close to 260, I'll add to the position. I'll try and build the position as it moves higher. I think you want to see these tactical opportunities as they are presented to you in front of you. It's refiners, it's fertilizer names, it's the exchanges. Those are the areas right now where you can find a little alpha.
Bryn, tech saw the biggest inflow in 4 weeks last week. The gains for a lot of these mega caps over a 1 week period have been pretty darn good. Alphabet up 9% in a week. Now, a lot of these names I'm going to read to you certainly needed this, because the week prior, it would have looked like the opposite. Meta up 7.5% in a week, Nvidia 7%, Amazon, Apple, and Microsoft all with pretty good gains. And as we said, tech had the biggest inflow in 4 weeks. So in times of uncertainty, especially about the macro, perhaps, money's going to flow right back. And we're learning that lesson over and over again.
Yeah, and then also to that, the premium of these tech companies to the S&P has come down dramatically. And so I think it's hard to get too bearish on tech in general, because as we said at the beginning of the show, albeit it's concentrated, all of the earnings growth is coming from, or the majority is coming from technology. And ultimately, these companies are investing in a new technology called AI. There'll be a ton of waste. We see a ton of waste at Meta that they've already wasted. But ultimately, I think it's just too consequential if you're going to get bearish, because these names are just such a big part of the index. And also going into earnings, I think Google's going to have great earnings. I think Apple's going to have great earnings. So why would you want to be bearish on these names after they've already had a correction, when in about 2 weeks they're come out with earnings, which I think will be very strong just in aggregate?
Yeah, what do you think, Joe? I mean, Nvidia's gotten 170 back the other day, right? We had waited, it was stuck, it got above, and it's held. So, now it's nicely above. But there's the dip last week, and then the recovery.
Look, I've spoken over the last several weeks about how I don't understand the frustration that appears to be exhibited in the industry regarding the performance of NVIDIA over the last 6 months. Okay, it's down 4%. I understand that, but it's basically consolidating. And I think your expectation is that this consolidation base leads to, over the next 6 months, an overall advance. I don't think anything about the semiconductor industry is telling you a story that we're going to see a deterioration in the quality of earnings. I think when you look at the semi-equipment names, I think when you look at some of the semi names like AMD, there's a really embedded, powerful story underneath that's suggesting AI is advancing much faster than we anticipated. Agentic AI is advancing much faster than anticipated, and therefore the need, the pull, the demand for these chips is going to remain insatiable.
Well, sure, but if you look at, Jimmy, we can just look at Micron for a moment. I know you don't own it, but it needs to be looked at almost every day. So it's 380. Let's back it out for, I don't know, a month. Let's take a look at a month, because it tells the story here. There's your big slide down. So it was $314 on March 31st. It's had a nice move, obviously, since that. So we're at 381. this is almost now a barometer for how the semis are being perceived within the market.
Or at least a segment of it, which is the memory chips. And as I mentioned before, there's high demand for the memory chips. Prices have been going higher. And unlike normal cycles for memory chips, there hasn't been a flood of new supply coming online. So that slide over the last few weeks is not because of new supply. It's because of companies that use these chips finding other solutions, finding more ways to be efficient, and perhaps decreasing the demand. Ultimately, I think the demand is going to be there for these memory chips. As I referenced earlier with Microsoft, that wasn't the only one. I mean, there are a lot of companies out there that have been looking for, and this isn't even, I'm talking about AI applications right now. This is to say nothing about non-AI applications for memory chips where they just simply can't get the chips.
You had a nice buy in this.
Yeah, and I didn't get anywhere near the bottom, but I thought it was overdone. I didn't try to get the bottom. I wanted to get it when it was on the upswing and bounced back. As we go out to next year's earnings, and who knows what they'll look like. But right now, the guidance or the prediction for next year's earnings from analysts is that it's a very cheap stock. It's back to where the commodity should be priced. But to Joe's point, at AMD, if you look at the chart on NVIDIA, to your point, or AMD or Taiwan Semi, they're all in consolidation phases. Now, they didn't have the big drawdown that NVIDIA had, but that's where a lot of tourist money is. So I think the whole space is really consolidating at this point.
Brandon, the only other stock I want to hit before we take a break right now is Tesla. You own it, as we know. JP Morgan made a call on it today that's underweight, okay? 145 is the price target. They're looking at 60%-ish downside from here. I'm wondering what you think about this. So the deliveries have been bad. There's no other way to say it. They're tracking 7% lower than the most recent consensus and 74% below the prior consensus. Stock down 20% this year, 28% from its 52-week high. What do you say about that now?
I thought that was like Steve's report, not JP Morgan's. It's like, so if the market is going, if the market is going to price Tesla on the Model 3 and Y deliveries, right, because the S and X are going to go away, then I think his math or her math could be correct. But we know the market does not price Tesla on that. And I think one of the things that we will want to see is that the S and X were discontinued in Fremont, and they are converting that gigafactory to Optimus production. And so we'll see how that's coming along over the next few quarters. But I think to get a one handle on this stock just has to be a complete re-rating of how the rest of the market values it. So I disagree. I will say the stock's in a really strong downtrend. I continue to sell calls and sell those down because it is in a downtrend. I think probably it could get into like the 315s, 320s before it stops falling. But you're going to need to see some news on Optimus this quarter's earnings and where they are to get the stock out of its current free fall.
All right, we'll take a break. We'll come back. We'll talk about our calls of the day. One firm seeing more than 30% ups.
All righty, let's take a look at Bloomberg.
About the weekend show, James, do you know they've got merch? They have swag. They have like hats and mugs, t-shirts and stuff. And I feel like it's time that we get some for Balance of Power. Is it just me? Swag go on the terminal? Balance of Power, we could do it different. We'll have something different. I say, if they're going to go with hats, t-shirts, and mugs, I'm putting in for the first Balance of Power ashtray. I think this is something could be a collector's item as we embed ourselves in every smoky back room in Washington. Think about it, get back to me. Because a lot of negotiations have to take place in those smoky back rooms if we are ever going to get the Department of Homeland Security open again. Do you know it has been 51 days now, and people aren't even counting anymore because people are, well, getting paid. President has found money, and there is a way forward, apparently, with the help of reconciliation. And that's where things start to get kind of foggy with the idea of reconciliation 2.0. And then a big question about what happens with the next fiscal year's budget. The president wants a lot of money, the bulk of it for the Pentagon. And we're lucky to spend some time with Nathan Dean for his take on this. Bloomberg Intelligence Senior U.S. policy analyst. Great to see you. How was Easter? Good?
That was good.
Kids were happy?
As happy as one could be.
Are they still getting the Easter basket? Is that something that you stop at a certain age? Or?
No, they still are.
All right, good. You hide them or you leave them out?
We hit them.
You hit them?
Yep, and they were up.
It's a sneaky Easter bunny.
And they were up at 6:30.
Is that right?
Absolutely.
That's what you get, Dad.
I was like, man.
I would expect nothing less from America's dad. And I'm not sure where to start here because it's all kind of the same story, isn't it? Republicans arguing over money without the involvement of Democrats. So I guess we'll take it one by one. DHS. When everybody comes back next week, is this over?
Well, I mean, look, President Trump signed an order saying that former Senator Mark Wayne Mullen, Secretary Mullen, should use whatever was in his ability to pay the DHS. Now, look, that's a one-time issue. You know, we can talk about the legality of, doing circumventing Congress. Democrats aren't going to push on that. But ultimately, somehow the DHS is going to get funded. And I do think that this strategy of embracing the Senate bill and then saying, look, for ICE and Customs and Border Patrol, we're going to use reconciliation. I think that gets enough Republicans on board. Democrats can say, not our hands, we're washing ourselves of this. And the Republicans move on to reconciliation. This is where it gets tricky, though. Because if you talk to Lindsey Graham, the chairman of the Senate Budget Committee, he says 2 reconciliation bills. One defense and national security and border patrol. The next one, Save America Act.
So you got a 3-point.
Next thing you know, Senator Rick Scott's like, no, I'm not going to do this because the Save America Act probably won't get past the Senate parliamentarian, and you're probably not going to get one after September 30th, right before an election anyway. So, what we're telling our clients is if you start small, you think under 500 billion, this is just, throwing out ideas. If you look at a bill that's probably under 500 billion that's specifically tied to defense in Iran and so forth, it's feasible. Anything north of that, I'd go much
It's
lower.
pretty easy to get to $1 trillion, though, right? When you start talking to lawmakers.
Exactly, man.
And we'll try to do that.
Every smoking room that you were talking
Absolutely,
about, every lobbyist in town is like, this is the vehicle, we're going to try and get this to the president's desk.
Amazing. With that said, reconciliation also needs to play a role in defense budgeting here. How would this happen? If the president wants $1.5 trillion defense budget, does it all come out of regular order, or does reconciliation have to help?
So in that 1.5 trillion, 350 billion was earmarked for reconciliation.
Yes.
The rest was from appropriations.
So what's the point of that?
Honestly, the point is
just so it's not such a shocking number.
I think it's also to just try and get these bills. Look, they were able to get $150 billion through the One Big Beautiful Bill of last year. That wasn't really all that controversial. This actually sidesteps the Democrats. President Trump would love the strategy of being able to say, look, I just don't want to deal with the Democrats. We're going to do it for you anyway. But what we're looking at it from an investor point of view is we're trying to see how much of this is tied to munitions, how much of this is tied to counter-drone technology, how much of this can be allocated in the first year. Because if you get that cash up front, somebody like Lockheed Martin, RTX, Northrop Grumman, from the investor point of view, that's going to flow into the defense contractors much quicker than something like a 5, 6, 7 year program. So come April 21st, when we get the next round of these specifics, what we're going to be looking for is how much can you bank in the year 1 and year 2, because that's actually much more of an immediate hit to the.
That makes a lot of sense. So would that suggest that maybe not all of this is factored into these defense stocks, because they've been kind of hanging out with some big numbers we're talking about in Washington on the assumption that this is baked in, that people saw this coming?
Well, everybody loves to say, I don't care about the White House budget, because they take it and they throw it over.
That's right.
So their Congress meeting and throw it into the can.
Yeah.
But a number will pass, whether it's appropriations, continuing resolutions, or reconciliation. There will be a number, and that number most likely will increase from the $883 billion the Department of Defense got this year, not including the $150 from the One Big Beautiful Bill. And then those numbers will ultimately fly down to the defense industry. I mean, look, this is the #1 priority for President Trump at the moment.
Yes.
He's not focused on affordability. He's making statements like, I don't care if states have to pay for Medicaid.
Or Medicaid,
Exactly. This is his #1 priority, and you should see those priorities transform into the priorities of Congress.
So if you're Raytheon or Boeing or Lockheed, these are boom times here. And I haven't mentioned the supplemental. So you've got $1.5 trillion coming, presumably, if they can pass that budget. A good chunk of that will be in reconciliation, but there's another request, a supplemental request, reportedly at least, to add $200 billion more. Is that still coming?
Well, look, I think the request may come, and I actually think it may be included here, just because from the standpoint of trying to get it through before the midterms, another supplemental request is just going to really make things messy. So I wouldn't be surprised if they just focused on what you could do in reconciliation.
Got it.
But there are going to be questions from GOP lawmakers saying, and Senator Kennedy from Louisiana, and I'm paraphrasing here, he's like, I want to see the candy, or however he phrased it, he does it in a great eloquent way. He's like, I'm not going to hand over the money yet until I see what it's actually used.
Sure, yeah.
So when President Trump says things that this is for Iran and other conflicts, and using the quotes for those of you on the radio, there are going to be questions from the Republican lawmakers saying, look, if we're going to give you this money, we need to know what it's earmarked for. I don't think the White House has really provided that level of detail to Congress yet. So we'll have to see how it plays over the next few weeks.
So this is going to take up the rest of the year, right? I mean, maybe there's some move on crypto, but this will be essentially the final mission for the Republican-controlled Congress until the midterms.
Yep, and the key date here is the 4th of July, because that's when President Trump wants it wrapped up, submitted to him, so he can sign it on the 4th of July.
For the budget, that is.
For the budget.
So he wants something, by the 1st of June, he wants reconciliation on his desk, budget by the 4th of July. Is that right?
I think my take was that you would get all the reconciliation package and stuff, but the problem for the Republicans here though is that they have to move quick, because if you don't get something done by the 4th of July, you get into August, they're not here, you get into September, you're dealing with a continuing resolution to keep the government open, October, they're not here. And for every date past the 4th of July, those Republican moderates who would potentially be on board with something like embracing or I'm just throwing pick whatever small group on the Republican side you want, they're going to be thinking about their own election changes. And the prediction markets, as of this morning, Kalshi's contract out there is 83% chance the Democrats are going to take the House.
Wow.
And so if you're one of those 20 or so moderate lawmakers on the Republican side, you don't want to take any vote that potentially could gamble that outcome. So any bill that doesn't pass within like April or May or get that momentum, it's going to really struggle.
So the store's closed after the 4th of July. When you're out there with the family on the South Lawn, watching the UFC fight at the White House, that will be the end of the legislative agenda, is what you're saying.
And it's either yes. I was going to make a joke about the IndyCar race in August, but I don't plan to be here for that.
I don't get all right. It's going to be 120 degrees out here with IndyCar in Washington. Do people know what it's like around here in the summer? It's a swamp.
I'm going to be telling my clients where all the bathrooms are and all the air conditioning are.
She will. UFC, does BI hand out like tickets to clients? Can you get me into that thing?
I'll look into it.
Okay, that sounds like a no. And on the swag, no one does swag better than BI, right? Bloomberg Intelligence. Sometimes Nathan will wear it in. You guys have the backpacks. You guys have like all weather gear. Well, I don't know. You probably have skis. I don't know what else you have. Could we do something maybe like a collab where we get like a merch go? Or so have you put any thought into this?
Next time we talk about AI and tech, I'll wear my BI hoodie. I have a BI hoodie.
You have a BI hoodie?
Yep.
I think like a BOP hoodie seems like wouldn't be too much to ask. I don't know. I've talked to James about this. It's just never happened before. Thank you for being with us, as always, Nathan. Find Nathan's podcast. This is pretty simple. By subscribing to ours. We share the same news feed. This is how much we believe in Bloomberg Intelligence and America's Dad. Subscribe at Apple, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcast, The Balance of Power, and you'll get Nathan.
You can listen to my podcast on Apple Podcast and Podomatic. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the vitamin B complex. This is really important to boost up your energy levels. Vitamin B complex helps the electron transport chain to produce ATP. Your energy levels will go up. Your cellular metabolism will improve. Your tissues will improve. And B12 helps to protect your neurons. Super important to protect your neurons, protect your nerves, protect your brain function. Omega-3 helps your cardiovascular health. It brings down inflammation and helps you to control your lipid profile. By doing that, you're improving your cardiovascular health. You're perfusing blood throughout your different tissues, including your brain, so it's healthy. Omega-3 helps your cardiovascular health and your other organ systems. Super important. Digestive enzyme complex. It reduces the load on your pancreas. It helps you to break up carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids so you digest easier and you have less stress on your pancreas. This is really important. And digestive enzyme complex has bromelain. It's an enzyme that helps to break up clots. And digestive enzyme complex has the proteolytic enzymes to break up glycoproteins, which is super important during the cold season. So it's a dual purpose supplement. Take it every day. So a great stack to help with your pancreatic pancreatic health and your digestive health, digestive enzyme complex, omega-3 to help with your cardiovascular health, and vitamin B complex to protect your neurons and rev up your cellular metabolism and boost up your energy levels. By taking this stack, you're helping your body to heal. You're giving your body the nutrients it needs to slow down the aging process. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Al Jazeera.
Target claims U.S. assets that it says it is consistently hitting. And the message there is clear that it will continue to target GCC countries as long as they continue to associate themselves with the U.S. or as long as Iran sees U.S. assets on the ground that it can target in the GCC. So this retaliatory strategy is not shifting. The U.S. and Israel are ratcheting up the rhetoric of carrying out more attacks on Iran and then following through. All the while, you have statements coming in from officials here in the UAE, the Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Qatar, really mirroring what each other is saying. Diplomacy going on in between the GCC states, pushing for the idea of a return to dialogue. They do want to hold Iran accountable for this retaliatory strategy that they've used since the war began, but they are continuing to push for a return to dialogue because they know the only way out of this war is at the negotiation table.
So, Mr. Ravi in Dubai, thank you. All right, let's go back to Kimberly Halkett in the White House. And Kimberly, we've of course reflected on some of the statements that Donald Trump has had to say as we await that all-important press conference a little bit later on. But do we have any sense, given that we've heard from Iran about what they are looking for by way of their latest sort of peace plan initiative, whether or not there is a US negotiating team working indirectly or directly with mediators either in Pakistan or elsewhere? I mean, who is driving that diplomatic voice? Because at the moment, all we're really hearing from is Donald Trump, and his main focus has been largely on threats.
That's right, but we know, and it's been confirmed, that there are back-channel discussions that are taking place. The U.S. Vice President, J.D. Vance, is leading those and has been up most of the night, reportedly, working through intermediaries. We also know that there's a periphery role being played by the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, as well as envoys Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff. Now, again, in terms of what this looks like, there hasn't been a clear picture. And so that's why many are looking to get further details from the U.S. president when he holds this press conference that is scheduled for the top of the hour. Unclear if it'll start on time or not. But what we expect from this press conference is that the U.S. president is likely to be as wide-ranging as always in terms of the topics he'll cover. And that not only will he give us a glimpse into what this back-channeling looks like and whether or not he's really willing to entertain an off-ramp to this hostility, or whether he intends to follow through on his threats, and that is to strike civilian infrastructure, energy, as well as bridges, which we've noted is a violation of the laws of war. Now, the other thing the U.S. president is expecting to do is to really play to the American people. It's worth underscoring this is an unpopular war here in the United States, but the U.S. president is also a showman, and he knows that he's got a made-for-Hollywood ending with the rescue of that second airman, that story that Al Jazeera English broke on Saturday evening. And he wants to give the details of those as well, and he wants to be the face of that rescue that, by all accounts, was quite dramatic. And so we expect that the U.S. president is using that rescue as the reason for this press conference, but expect that it will also provide those details that many are looking for, and whether or not the U.S. president is really firm about this deadline that he's laid out for Tuesday, 8 p.m. Washington time, whether or not he will extend it as he's extended deadlines against Iran in the past.
Kimberly, thanks as always. Kimberly Halkett there, the White House. Paul Musgrave is an associate professor at Georgetown University in Qatar and a US foreign policy analyst. He's with me here in the studio. Good to have you back, Paul. Let's take in everything that we're hearing at the moment because, importantly, Iran has countered the ceasefire initiative presented by Pakistan in response to Islamabad. Iran's listing several key demands. Here they are. They're threefold. The deal must encompass an end to regional conflicts. So essentially, we can't push this forward at the barrel of a gun. A protocol for safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz. And thirdly, reconstruction and the lifting of sanctions. Where do you place these demands and the scale of reasonability?
Well, on the one hand, they are fairly reasonable. Iran was, in this instance, the victim of an attack launched by the United States and Israel during negotiations. So I can understand where they're coming from. On the other hand, this is, as we would say in American English, swing for the fences stuff, right? This is setting the goalposts so high that it would be difficult for any sort of negotiated agreement to get to them. And tellingly, they do not address the key points that the United States has raised. That's change in regime, fine, understandable, nuclear weapons, which was, of course, at the root of this conflict, and then anything having to do with Iran's offensive military capabilities. I think that not only in Washington or Tel Aviv, but in capitals throughout the region, people are going to note that this leaves Iran, this proposal, if accepted, which it won't be, would leave Iran as the undisputed winner of this conflict, but it also means that there would be setting up a conflict for later on when those traditional issues of disagreement would come back to the fore.
And just to remind our viewers about some of those key US demands, you mentioned some of them. One of the key ones, obviously, on top of scrapping its nuclear program at all levels, is to completely rid itself of any kind of defensive long-range missile capability as well, essentially stripping it of any ability to defend itself from missiles should they come from the United States or indeed Israel. I mean, given that that is such a firm red line, I mean, where is the point of light between these two sides moving forward, if any?
Well, judging by media reports, it is heartening that Iran is not laying out red lines like making sure that it keeps a nuclear weapons portfolio. And certainly talking about a protocol for safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz is different from saying it's ours, it's territorial waters, we're going to keep it. So we might say that there's been some movement here, but clearly, especially after the escalation and after the threats this Sunday, it's very hard for any Iranian regime to come back and say, you know what, let's go back and give in to the Americans' demands. That's not what we're going to see. And for all that President Trump has teased that we're going to have dramatic news coming out of this press conference in an hour or so, I really think that it's hard to see how the United States could end this conflict like this, given the important interest that the United States still has to resolve.
Interesting points you're making there. I mean, we are, I guess, clutching at straws a little bit.
All right. We are live streaming on Rumble and YouTube. We are reaching the 4 hour mark here. We're at 3 hours and 48 minutes. I'm going to reboot the actual live stream on Rumble and YouTube to be able to cover the speech from Trump that should take place at 1 o'clock. We are also simulcasting on X Spaces. The X Spaces will continue running. So please join the Trump speech that will be taking up shortly. I'm going to shut down the Rumble and the YouTube live feed and then create a new feed because I don't want these files to be too large when I republish them on the different channels. So thank you for watching. Please come back with the new live stream to catch how the markets are going to react to Trump's speech, because I suspect that what he has to say is going to affect the equity market and the oil market.